The claw is small enough to fit in a human hand, but it does not feel small when it comes out of the rock. It is curved, sharp along the inner edge, and built to be lifted from the ground like a folded knife. Around it, the sandstone is red and dry, the color of old iron under a desert sun. A few inches away there may be fragments of toe bone, splinters of a foot, or the thin wall of a skull crushed almost flat by time. Nothing about the piece looks like a movie monster at first glance. It looks like an animal. Light, narrow, and quick. A predator that belonged to sand, heat, feathers, and the last chapters of the Cretaceous world. The real Velociraptor does not begin in a jungle. It begins in Mongolia, in rock that once formed beneath wind-blown dunes and sudden storms. It begins at places like Bayanzag, the Flaming Cliffs, where the cliffs glow red at sunset and bones weather slowly out of the slopes. In that desert stone, scientists found an animal much smaller than the one made famous on screen, but in many ways more interesting. It was not a giant. It was not taller than a person. It was a dromaeosaur, a feathered theropod, lightly built, with long arms, a stiffened tail, a narrow skull, and one enlarged claw on each foot. The animal in the rock was stranger than the monster in the imagination because it was real. Velociraptor mongoliensis lived during the late Cretaceous, roughly 80 million to 70 million years ago, in Central Asia. Its best-known fossils come from the Jadakta Formation of Mongolia, a deposit famous for animals preserved in red sandstone, sometimes in positions so complete that they seem interrupted rather than buried. This was not a wet tropical forest. It was a semi-arid landscape of dunes, dry flats, intermittent water, low vegetation, and storms that could turn sand into a moving wall. The dinosaurs here lived in a world where water mattered, shade mattered, and a moment of collapsing dune could end a life and preserve it for tens of millions of years. If deep time and the real animals behind familiar names are what bring you back to Jurassical, subscribing keeps the next journey close. To understand Velociraptor, it helps to set aside the image that most people carry. The animal was about the length of a large dog from snout to tail tip, perhaps around 1.5 to 2 meters long depending on the individual, but much of that length was tail. Its body was low and light. Its weight may have been closer to that of a large turkey or a small wolf than a human adult. The skull was long and shallow. The teeth were recurved and serrated. The hands carried 3 clawed fingers. The legs were built for quick movement across firm ground, with the second toe held up so the sickle claw could stay sharp and ready. That claw has been misunderstood for a long time. It was not simply a slashing hook, swinging open like a scythe with each step. The joint anatomy suggests it could be raised and flexed, used in close contact with prey, perhaps to pin, grip, or help restrain struggling animals. In living birds of prey, the feet often do the holding, while the beak does the killing and feeding. Velociraptor was not a bird of prey, but it was close enough to that part of the dinosaur family tree that the comparison is useful if handled cautiously. The claw was a tool. The whole animal was the system that made it dangerous. Around that tool was a body much more bird-like than the old reconstructions allowed. Velociraptor belonged to Dromaeosauridae, the raptor family, a branch of theropod dinosaurs close to the ancestry of birds. These animals shared traits that once seemed exclusively avian: wishbones, hollow bones, 3-fingered hands, backward-pointing pubic bones in many species, stiff tails, and in many cases feathers. The boundary between bird and non-bird dinosaur becomes narrow here, not because Velociraptor was flying through the Mongolian sky, but because its body was made from the same evolutionary language that would eventually fill the modern world with crows, hawks, sparrows, and gulls. The strongest direct evidence for feathers in Velociraptor came from the forearm bone of a specimen assigned to Velociraptor mongoliensis. Along the ulna, researchers identified small raised bumps comparable to quill knobs in living birds. In birds, these marks can anchor the ligaments that hold large secondary feathers to the arm. Their presence in Velociraptor does not mean the animal could fly. It means the arms carried substantial feathers. A predator that many people imagined as scaly and reptilian was almost certainly covered, at least in part, with a coat of feathers, including longer feathers along the forearms. This changes the animal at once. Picture a narrow head moving low over red sand, but behind it a body clothed in texture. Not fur, not scales alone, but feathers arranged over the arms and body, perhaps lying close in some places, broader in others, with a tail that may have carried display feathers near the end. The colors are unknown. They may have been muted desert tones or patterned in ways that helped individuals signal to each other. The fossils do not give us every detail. They give us enough to remove the old skin and replace it with something more alive. Feathers did not evolve first for powered flight. In many theropods, they probably helped with insulation, display, brooding behavior, body contouring, or signaling. Small animals lose heat quickly, especially during cold nights, and the Jadocta environment was not a steady tropical greenhouse. It could have been hot in the day, cooler after sunset, and seasonally variable. A feathered covering would have helped stabilize the body of a small active predator. It may also have made social communication possible through posture, color, movement, and display, long before any lineage turned feathered arms into true wings. The desert itself would not have looked empty. Modern deserts can appear bare from a distance and still hold insects, lizards, birds, burrowing mammals, shrubs, roots, and life waiting for rain. The late Cretaceous Gobi was different from the modern one, but it was not lifeless. Low plants grew in places where water collected. Intermittent streams crossed the basin after storms. Dune fields shifted. Temporary ponds may have appeared and vanished. At the edges of these small resources, animals left tracks, hunted, nested, and died. The fossil record of the Jadocta Formation is not a record of a wasteland. It is a record of a dry ecosystem that could preserve its dead with extraordinary detail. Sand was one of the great forces in that world. It built dunes. It filled depressions. It covered eggs, skeletons, nests, and bodies. It could also kill. Some of the most famous fossils from the Mongolian Cretaceous appear to have been buried quickly, possibly by sand collapses triggered by storms or unstable dunes. Rapid burial protected bones from scavengers and weathering. It sealed animals in positions that can still be read today. For paleontologists, the same sand that ended lives became the reason those lives can be studied. The Jadocta Formation preserves more than Velociraptor. It has yielded Protoceratops, the small horned dinosaur with a parrot-like beak and a broad frill. It preserves Oviraptorosaurs, animals once misread as egg thieves but now understood in many cases as nest tenders and brooders. It preserves small mammals, lizards, turtles, and other theropods. This was an ecosystem of modest-sized animals more than towering giants. There were no long-necked sauropods dominating every horizon here. The drama of the place was lower to the ground, written in nests, jaws, claws, and the sudden violence of sand. The most famous evidence of Velociraptor's life is also evidence of its risk. In 1971, a Polish Mongolian expedition discovered the fossil known as the fighting dinosaurs, a Velociraptor and a Protoceratops locked together in red sandstone. The Velociraptor's sickle claw is positioned near the neck of the Protoceratops. The Protoceratops grips the raptor's arm with its beak. The two animals seem caught in the middle of contact, neither one safely predator nor simply prey. They were buried before the scene could resolve. Whatever happened in those final seconds, the fossil is one of the clearest windows into dinosaur behavior ever found. It is tempting to narrate that fossil as a complete battle with a beginning, middle, and end. The evidence allows some parts of that story, but not all of it. We can see contact between the animals. We can see the positions of limbs and jaws. We can infer struggle. We cannot know whether the Velociraptor ambushed the Protoceratops, attacked a nesting adult, scavenged a dying animal, or became trapped in a fight that began for reasons now lost. Scientists often suggest that a sand collapse or sudden burial event killed them. The exact moment before burial remains uncertain. That uncertainty is part of the fossil's power. There is no winner in the stone. The predator does not stand over the herbivore. The herbivore does not walk away. Both animals disappear into the same sediment. The claw and the beak remain pressed into the same final page. It is a small Cretaceous scene, but it carries something that wide summaries of evolution often miss. Dinosaurs were not symbols of groups. They were individuals, with bones that broke, muscles that strained, and moments that ended without warning. Protoceratops mattered in the life of Velociraptor because it was one of the most common herbivores in the Gedocta ecosystem. It was not a giant ceratopsian like Triceratops, which would appear later in North America. Protoceratops was smaller, roughly sheep-sized in many adults, walking on 4 legs, carrying a strong beak and a frill that varied with age and perhaps between individuals. It fed on low vegetation in dry environments where plants could be tough, sparse, and unevenly distributed. For a predator the size of Velociraptor, an adult Protoceratops was dangerous prey. A juvenile, a sick animal, or an individual caught at a nest would have been a different matter. Imagine the edge of a dune field after rain. The sand is crusted on top, damp beneath, marked by small tracks. A lizard cuts a narrow line between shrubs. Insects move under plant litter. A herd or loose cluster of Protoceratops has crossed nearby, leaving deep impressions where the feet pressed into soft ground. Their beaks clip vegetation close to the soil. One animal pauses, head raised. Somewhere downwind, a feathered predator watches from low cover, its body held almost horizontal, its tail steady behind it. This is not a monster entering a scene. It is a small carnivore making decisions with limited time and limited energy. A hunt can fail. A bite can miss. A kicked limb can break a rib. A beak can close on an arm. The fossil record preserves enough injured bones in dinosaurs to remind us that survival was not automatic for predator or prey. Velociraptor may have been quick and well-armed, but it lived among animals that defended themselves, escaped, hid, or fought back. The skull of Velociraptor tells us much about feeding. It was long, low, and lightly built compared with the massive skulls of later tyrannosaurs. The teeth were not bone-crushing pegs. They were blades for gripping and cutting flesh. The jaws likely worked with quick bites, tearing motions, and the help of the forelimbs and feet. Its prey may have included small mammals, lizards, juvenile dinosaurs, eggs, hatchlings, and any animal small enough to overpower. Larger prey could be attacked under the right conditions, but the fossil evidence does not require Velociraptor to be a constant hunter of adult Protoceratops. The popular idea of Velociraptor as a coordinated pack hunter is less secure than many assume. Some dromaeosaurs may have gathered around carcasses or moved in loose associations, but direct evidence for mammal-like pack hunting in Velociraptor is limited. The fighting dinosaurs fossil shows one individual in contact with one Protoceratops. Trackways and bone beds from related animals may suggest social behavior in some cases, but social behavior is not the same as modern wolf-like cooperation. Velociraptor may have hunted alone most of the time. It may also have tolerated others of its kind around rich food sources. The evidence leaves room, but not certainty. A lone Velociraptor moving through the Gedocta would have been alert to more than prey. It had to watch the sky, the ground, and other carnivores. Small predators often live between opportunities and danger. They steal eggs, take insects, follow scent trails, investigate carcasses, and retreat when the risk becomes too high. A raptor that survived long enough to breed was not reckless. It was efficient. The real animal was probably less theatrical than the one in fiction, and for that reason, more believable. The arms were part of that reality. Long feathers along the forelimbs may have created surfaces useful in balance, display, shielding nests, or maneuvering during leaps and grappling. They were not wings in the flying sense, but they were not empty decoration. A small feathered theropod using its arms to stabilize its body while pinning prey is not difficult to imagine. The feathers could flare, the claws could grip, the tail could counterbalance, the animal's outline would change with movement, expanding for display or collapsing close to the body as it ran. The tail of Velociraptor was stiffened by elongated bony rods and tendons. This did not make it a rigid stick, but it limited excessive bending and helped create a balancing organ. When the animal turned, leapt, or shifted weight onto one foot, the tail would have helped control the motion. Many small theropods relied on long tails for balance, but in dromaeosaurs the structure became especially refined. In a fast animal with grasping feet and active arms, balance was not a minor detail. It was part of predation, escape, display, and everyday movement across uneven sand. Tracks from raptor-like dinosaurs are difficult to connect to exact species, but footprints from two-toed walking patterns show how some dromaeosaurs carried the enlarged second toe above the ground. Instead of a full three-toed print, the track can preserve the marks of the other toes while the sickle claw remains lifted. This fits the anatomy of the foot. The killing claw was protected from constant wear. It stayed curved and sharp because the animal did not drag it through sand with every step. In life, the absence of that claw from a footprint would have been a signature of its presence. Velociraptor was not alone among feathered raptors. Related dromaeosaurs from China, such as Microraptor, preserve long feathers on arms and legs, showing how elaborate plumage could become in this group. Other relatives, including larger forms like Zhenyuanlong, show that substantial feathers were not limited to tiny gliding species. These discoveries changed the way paleontologists reconstructed the entire family. When one branch after another reveals feathers, the most reasonable interpretation is that many dromaeosaurs, including those without direct feather impressions, carried plumage of some kind. Fossil preservation is uneven. Feathers require special conditions to leave clear impressions, and the Jadakta sandstones are not the same as fine lake deposits that preserve delicate plumage in China. A Velociraptor skeleton from Mongolia will usually give bone, not a shadow of every feather. That is why the quill knobs matter. They are not soft tissue impressions. They are marks on bone, traces of feather attachment strong enough to survive even when the feathers themselves vanished. The absence of feather impressions in many specimens does not mean bare skin. It means the rock did not preserve everything. A bone can say more than it seems to say. Along an ulna, a row of small bumps becomes the evidence for feathers. A crushed skull becomes the outline of a narrow face. A broken arm in the fighting dinosaur's fossil becomes proof that prey could injure predator. The story of Velociraptor is not recovered from a complete animal standing whole in stone. It is assembled from pieces, each one limited, each one carrying a different kind of information. The name Velociraptor means swift Caesar. Henry Fairfield Osborn described Velociraptor mongoliensis in 1924, after American Museum of Natural History expeditions to Mongolia brought back extraordinary fossils from the Gobi. Those expeditions were searching for evidence about early mammals and human origins, but they found some of the most famous dinosaur fossils in history. The flaming cliffs yielded dinosaur eggs, Protoceratops skeletons, oviraptorosaurs, and the first known remains of Velociraptor. The name came from a time when the animal was known from far less material than paleontologists have today, but it captured something important: speed, grasping, and predatory motion. The Gobi fossil sites became one of the great archives of the dinosaur age. Over nearly a century of fieldwork, Mongolian and international teams have found dinosaurs, nests, embryos, early mammals, lizards, turtles, and tracks across Cretaceous deposits. The country preserves a sequence of late Cretaceous worlds, from older formations to the Nemegt beds near the end of the period. Velociraptor belongs especially to the middle part of that story, to Jadakta time, when the animals were often small, the sediments dry, and the preservation sometimes sudden enough to catch life in positions that feel almost too direct. There is a difference between a place being ancient and a place being unreachable. Mongolia's Gobi is a real landscape today, crossed by wind, sunlight, cold nights, and people who know its distances. The Cretaceous Gobi is not the same place, but the modern cliffs are the surface through which that older world becomes visible. A fossil hunter walking a ravine can see a piece of bone gleaming at the edge of a slope. A toe bone can lead to a foot. A foot can lead to a skeleton. A skeleton can lead back to an animal moving across sand beneath a different sky. Velociraptor's world was part of the Mesozoic, but not the Jurassic. This matters because the word raptor is often tied in popular culture to Jurassic stories. The real Velociraptor was a Cretaceous dinosaur living after the Jurassic had ended in the final period of non-avian dinosaur evolution. By the time it moved through Mongolia, sauropods, stegosaurs, early birds, and many theropod lineages had already passed through long histories of change. Flowering plants had appeared and were spreading in many regions, though the Jadakta landscape still seems to have supported dry adapted vegetation, shrubs, and conifer-like plants in patches where water allowed. The air above the dunes would not have been empty. Pterosaurs may have flown over distant basins. Small birds and bird-like dinosaurs were part of Cretaceous ecosystems across Asia. Insects moved through the low plants. The boundary between dinosaur and bird was no longer something waiting far in the future. It was alive in the bodies of animals all around the raptor. Some were closer to true birds, some were feathered non-avian dinosaurs. Some may have looked, to unfamiliar eyes, like strange ground birds with teeth, tails, claws, and no place in any modern field guide. For a small predator, eggs were valuable. The Jadakta Formation is famous for nests, eggshell, and animals preserved in brooding postures. Oviraptorosaurs, once accused of stealing eggs because they were found near nests, are now often understood as animals that cared for their own eggs in bird-like ways. This change in interpretation is a warning. Fossils are evidence, but first impressions can be wrong. A skeleton over eggs does not necessarily mean theft, it can mean protection. A predator near a nest does not always mean attack. It may mean death occurred in a nesting ground, where many animals shared the same dangerous sand. Velociraptor may have taken eggs when it found them. Many living predators do. It may have raided nests of Protoceratops, lizards, other theropods, or anything else that left food unguarded. But we should not reduce its life to egg stealing. It had teeth and claws suited to living prey, and the Jadakta world offered many smaller animals. Mammals were present, though usually small. Lizards were abundant in many Gobi deposits. Juvenile dinosaurs would have been vulnerable after hatching. An opportunistic predator does not need one role. It survives by changing roles as the day and season require. At dawn, a velociraptor might move through the shadowed side of a dune, where the sand still holds the cool of night. Its feathers lie close against its body. Its head tilts towards small movements under a shrub. The long tail steadies each step. It is not roaring. It is not announcing itself. Predators that depend on surprise do not waste energy on display unless display is needed. Most of life is quieter than the moments fossils make famous. The animal's senses are difficult to reconstruct fully, but the skull suggests a capable predator. The eyes faced partly forward, improving depth perception compared with animals whose eyes sit entirely to the sides. The brain case of dromaeosaurs indicates a nervous system suited to active movement and coordination. Smell may have helped locate carrion, nests, or hidden prey. Hearing would have mattered in a landscape where small animals rustled in dry cover. Velociraptor did not need human-like intelligence to be effective. It needed the kind of intelligence that keeps a predator alive in a harsh place. Its hands were not pronated like human hands pressing palms down. Like other theropods, the palms faced inward toward each other. This is a small anatomical point, but it changes the way the animal should be imagined. The arms were not lizard arms held awkwardly to the side. They were bird-line forelimbs, folded and carried near the body, able to reach, grasp, and perhaps shield. The wrist anatomy in many maniraptoran theropods allowed folding movements that foreshadow the way birds tuck their wings. Velociraptor's arms were part of this larger evolutionary pattern. When those arms carried feathers, the body becomes a moving record of evolution before flight and after the origin of feathers. A feather can begin as insulation and become display. It can be used in brooding, balance, braking, or communication. It can become a surface that catches air, and in some lineages, that surface becomes flight. Velociraptor stands on one branch of that story. It did not become a bird. It did not need to. It shows that bird-like features had already spread deeply into the bodies of predatory dinosaurs. The modern bird on a fence post is not descended from Velociraptor itself, as far as evidence shows, but it is kin. It belongs to the same broad theropod inheritance, a living reminder that the dinosaur age did not end as completely as it once seemed. When a hawk flexes its talons or a crow folds its wings, there is no direct replay of Velociraptor's movements, but there is a family resemblance written in bone, tendon, and feather. The past is not alive in a simple way. It survives in modified bodies. Size is another place where accuracy matters. The largest Velociraptor individuals were around 6 feet long from snout to tail, but that number can mislead because the animal was not 6 feet tall. Its hip height was much lower. Its body mass was modest. Some estimates place it well below 45 kilograms, though values vary with reconstruction. Either way, it was not the towering animal of film. Larger raptors did exist. Deinonychus in North America was bigger. Utahraptor was much bigger. Achillibator, also from Mongolia but from different deposits, was larger as well. The real Velociraptor was one of the smaller, sharper members of its family. That smaller size changes the scenes we should imagine. It could move through narrow gaps in scrub. It could approach nests low to the ground. It could retreat quickly if a Protoceratops turned with its beak open. It could feed on small prey that would be ignored by a giant theropod. It would have lived closer to the ground than the giants that dominate museum halls. Its world was a world of knee-high plants, burrow entrances, eggshell fragments, dry tracks, and sudden shadows. There were larger dangers in Cretaceous Mongolia. Other theropods shared parts of the wider region, and over the broader late Cretaceous, Asian ecosystems included tyrannosauroids and other predators. Velociraptor was not always the top of every food chain. Even in its own environment, juveniles, injured adults, or individuals caught in the open could be vulnerable. Predation works in many directions when animals are small enough to be killed by something larger. A successful velociraptor was not just a hunter. It was also an animal avoiding becoming food. The Jadakta ecosystem is often described as semi-arid, with dunes and intermittent water, but that does not mean every day was dry in the same way. Seasonal rain could arrive hard enough to destabilize slopes. Water could collect in low places. Plants could pulse in growth after moisture returned. Animals may have timed nesting, movement, or feeding around these rhythms. In dry environments, life often concentrates around temporary abundance. A small pond can become a gathering point. A patch of green vegetation can draw herbivores. Herbivores draw predators. Then the water disappears, and the tracks harden or are buried. A fossil trackway, if preserved, is not a biography. It is a sentence from a life. One animal crossed one surface at one moment. The mud or sand received the feet. Sediment covered the marks. Time hardened them. Millions of years later, someone reads the spacing and depth and tries to recover speed, posture, or behavior. For Velociraptor, bones speak more clearly than tracks, but the principle is the same. The animal is never given whole. It is read through traces. Paleontology works by comparing those traces with living animals, related fossils, and the physics of bodies. A claw is not interpreted in isolation. Its curve, joint surfaces, muscle attachments, and wear are compared with other claws. A feather attachment mark is compared with birds. A skull opening is compared across theropods. A sediment layer is compared with dunes, rivers, soils, and storms. Every claim has a chain behind it. Some chains are strong, others are provisional. Good reconstructions make the difference clear. That is why the feathered velociraptor is not a decorative update. It is not simply a modern artistic preference. It follows from comparative anatomy and direct evidence. Feathered relatives surround it on the dinosaur family tree. Quill knobs are present on its own ulna. Bird-like anatomical features run through its body. The old scaly image survives because culture changes more slowly than science, and because a simple monster is easier to remember than a small feathered predator from a specific Cretaceous desert. But the evidence has moved on. In the museum, a velociraptor skeleton can look almost delicate. The skull is not a crushing machine. The ribs are light, the arms are long. The tail extends behind the body like a balancing beam. Without feathers, the skeleton is already bird-like. With feathers restored, the animal becomes something stranger and more complete. It becomes an animal that could have lowered its body in sand, lifted its feathered arms in threat, and vanished behind a low rise before a larger creature understood what had moved. Skin impressions from non-avian dinosaurs can be useful, but they do not erase feathers when they come from other body parts or other species. Some dinosaurs had scales. Some had feathers. Some probably had both. Birds today still carry scales on their feet, even while feathers cover most of the body. A feathered velociraptor may have had scaly toes and parts of the lower legs, with feathers on the body, arms, and perhaps tail. This mixture is not strange. It is exactly the kind of mosaic that evolution produces. The feet of Velociraptor carried 4 toes, but the first was reduced and did not function like the grasping rear toe of a perching bird. The second toe held the famous enlarged claw. The third and fourth toes bore the animal's walking weight. This arrangement meant the foot combined running support with a specialized weapon. The metatarsals were slender. The ankle was suited to quick terrestrial movement. When the animal walked, the body did not drag or sprawl. It moved with the erect limb posture of a dinosaur, body held above the legs, tail balancing the trunk. The sickle claw has often been shown cutting open prey with a single slash. Biomechanical studies of related dromaeosaurs suggest a more restrained and possibly more practical use. The claw may have hooked into flesh or onto the body of prey while the animal gripped with its feet. It could have helped anchor Velociraptor during a struggle, allowing the jaws to bite repeatedly. In smaller prey, that could be enough to immobilize the animal quickly. In larger prey, it would be risky. A Protoceratops could twist, bite, kick, and throw its weight into the attacker. The claw was dangerous, but it did not make Velociraptor invincible. Predation is not only impact, it is patience, hunger, and timing. A predator may spend far more time searching than attacking. It may walk for hours in heat, pause in shade, follow scent, listen for movement, and reject opportunities that look too costly. The fossil record preserves the rare dramatic contact. It does not preserve the long, uneventful morning when the raptor found nothing, or the evening when it settled near a shrub with an empty stomach and waited for the ground to cool. Drought would have shaped everything. In a semi-arid basin, animals cannot ignore water. A temporary pool becomes a center of risk. Herbivores gather there. Predators approach because herbivores gather there. Small mammals and lizards come to drink or feed near damp sediment. Tracks overlap. The mud churns. Then, as days pass, the pool shrinks, and the edges become dangerous. A body mired in wet sand can attract scavengers. A scavenger can become trapped. In places like the Jadokta, death and preservation may have come from the same unstable ground. Scientists do not reconstruct ancient climates from imagination. They use sediments, soils, rock structures, plant traces, fossil assemblages, and comparisons with modern environments. Windblown sandstones suggest dunes. Calichet can indicate dry soils where calcium carbonate accumulated. Short-lived water deposits show that rivers or ponds appeared at times. The Jadocta Formation seems to record a dry, dune-influenced environment with intermittent wet phases, not a permanent rainforest. That matters, because it changes the animal. Velociraptor was a predator of open, sandy, dry habitats, not a creature of dense, wet jungle. The plants in this world were probably not the lush flowering thickets of later or wetter Cretaceous environments. Low shrubs, hardy vegetation, and conifer-related plants may have marked the landscape in patches. Roots held some surfaces together. Wind moved sand across others. After rain, green growth could appear quickly, drawing herbivores into open areas. Protoceratops and other plant eaters likely fed close to the ground, cropping whatever vegetation could survive. The food web began with these modest plants, not with towering forests. Velociraptor's prey base would have included animals that do not always dominate popular reconstructions. Small mammals lived in the Jadocta world. They were not yet the large, obvious mammals of the Cenozoic, but they were diverse enough to matter. Lizards were present, and in some Mongolian deposits quite abundant. Hatchling dinosaurs, eggs, insects, and carcasses would all have been resources. A small theropod predator in this ecosystem likely fed across a range of opportunities. The image of a raptor constantly attacking horned dinosaurs is too narrow. Under a slab of sandstone, a mammal jaw can be as important as a dinosaur skull. It tells us that the ground beneath the dinosaurs was alive, with smaller histories. Tiny teeth, delicate vertebrae, the shell of a turtle, the bones of lizards, the broken eggshell around a nest. These details make the landscape dense again. Velociraptor was not walking across a stage built only for itself. It moved through a community. Dinosaur eggs are one of the great themes of the Mongolian Gobi. In the early 20th century, discoveries at the Flaming Cliffs helped confirm that dinosaurs laid eggs, a fact that now seems obvious, but was once a major paleontological breakthrough. Nests and eggs shifted dinosaurs from museum monsters into breeding animals with life cycles. They hatched, grew, defended space, failed, succeeded, and sometimes died over the very nests they tended. In that world, a predator like Velociraptor would have known nesting grounds as places of both opportunity and danger. The word know here should not be taken in a human sense. It means learned through instinct, memory, smell, repeated experience, or simple association. A nesting colony produces sound, scent, broken shell, exposed movement, and defensive adults. A predator that discovers such a place once may return. A herbivore that loses eggs may defend more aggressively. Over many generations, this pressure becomes part of behavior. Fossils rarely preserve that whole process, but they preserve the pieces that make it plausible. Some of the most extraordinary Mongolian fossils show brooding postures in oviraptorosaurs, with arms arranged around nests in a way that strongly recalls birds. These animals were not Velociraptor, but they shared the same broader theropod world. Their presence matters because it shows bird-like behavior was not limited to flight. Sitting over eggs, sheltering a clutch, arranging the body above a nest, using feathered arms to cover young or eggs. These behaviors connect the Cretaceous ground to the living bird in ways that bones alone once could not. A feathered velociraptor near a nest does not have to be a villain. It may be a parent in one scene and a predator in another. Living animals do not occupy moral roles. A fox steals eggs and feeds its kits. A hawk tears flesh and shelters its young. A gull scavenges and defends a nesting ledge. Dinosaurs lived with the same simple pressures. Food had to be found. Young had to be protected. Energy had to be spent carefully. We do not have confirmed velociraptor nests with adults preserved in place the way some other theropods are known. But its close relatives and its position in the theropod tree make reproductive behavior an important part of any plausible reconstruction. It laid eggs. It hatched from an egg. Juveniles would have been smaller, more vulnerable, and perhaps proportioned differently from adults. Growth would have changed the animal's risks and diet. A young velociraptor might have hunted insects and small lizards before it could tackle larger prey. Adult form was the outcome of years of survival. Imagine a young raptor at the edge of a burrowed bank, its feathers still soft in texture, its limbs not yet fully strong. It snaps at beetles and small reptiles, missing often. It learns the shape of shade, the smell of carcass, the alarm movements of small animals. Around it, adults may ignore it, tolerate it, or compete with it, depending on circumstances we cannot fully know. The fossil record rarely gives childhood in detail, but every adult skeleton implies a long chain of juvenile days that were not preserved. Death came often to juveniles. This is true in modern ecosystems, and almost certainly true in the Cretaceous. Eggs failed. Hatchlings were taken by predators. Young animals starved during dry seasons. Dunes collapsed. Sudden storms buried animals in sediment. The few that reached adulthood carried the evidence of success in healed injuries, worn teeth, and mature bone. For every velociraptor skeleton that became a fossil, many more bodies disappeared completely, scavenged, weathered, scattered, or ground into sand. Fossilization is rare because it requires a sequence of unlikely events. The body must avoid complete destruction. It must be buried before weather and scavengers erase it. The chemistry must allow mineral replacement or preservation. The rock must survive deep time. Then, erosion must expose it at the surface at the right moment for discovery, not too early and not too late. The Geoducta Formation gave paleontologists unusual chances because rapid sand burial could protect skeletons, and modern erosion exposes those sandstones in cliffs and ravines. Even so, every fossil is a survivor of chance. A velociraptor bone weathering out of a cliff is already in danger when it becomes visible. Sun cracks it, wind abrades it, rain can loosen the surrounding sediment. A paleontologist may see the end of the bone before it breaks away. Or no one may pass in time. Many fossils are lost not in the Cretaceous, but in the final years before discovery, when they return briefly to the open air and then crumble back into the desert. The history of Mongolian paleontology is also a human story, and it should be handled with care. Early American expeditions brought international attention to the Gobi, but Mongolian scientists and institutions have been central to the discovery, study, and protection of these fossils. Later Polish Mongolian and Soviet Mongolian expeditions recovered many important specimens. Today, Mongolia treats some fossils, including the fighting dinosaurs, as national treasures. These bones belong not just to science in general, but to the geological and cultural heritage of the country where they were found. Fossil poaching has damaged that heritage. The Gobi's exposed bones have long attracted illegal collectors, and famous Mongolian dinosaurs have been smuggled into private markets. When fossils disappear into private hands without proper documentation, the loss is scientific as well as cultural. A skeleton stripped from its rock without locality data loses part of its story. Age, formation, position, associated animals, and sediment all matter. A dinosaur is not only its bones. It is the place those bones came from. Velociraptor mongoliensis is the type species of its genus. Another species, Velociraptor osmolske, has been named from material in northern China, though the public image of Velociraptor still centers on the Mongolian species. Taxonomy can change as new material is studied. Some specimens once assigned to a familiar name may be reassigned later. This is normal science, not confusion. Fossils are compared, diagnoses are revised, and the tree is adjusted. Velociraptor remains a real and distinctive animal, but the details of its relatives continue to sharpen. Dromaeosaurids as a group were widespread and diverse. Some were small and possibly arboreal or gliding, like Microraptor. Some were larger terrestrial predators. Some had long snouts. Some had robust skulls. Some carried elaborate feathers. The shared sickle claw and bird-like anatomy link them, but the group was not one shape repeated. Velociraptor represents a particular version of the raptor design, Small, desert-adapted, narrow-skulled, fast, and probably feathered, living among the low-slung animals of late Cretaceous Mongolia. It is easy to let famous names flatten diversity. Velociraptor becomes all raptors. Triceratops becomes all horned dinosaurs. Tyrannosaurus becomes all large predators. The fossil record is richer than that. In Mongolia alone, the Cretaceous produced horned dinosaurs without giant horns, beaked oviraptorosaurs, armored ankylosaurs, tyrannosauroids, ornithomimosaurs, therizinosaurs with strange claws, and many smaller animals. Velociraptor lived in one part of that wider Asian story. Near the end of a hot day, the dunes would change color. Shadows lengthen. The red cliffs deepen. Wind starts moving fine grains across the surface. Small animals emerge from cover. A Protoceratops herd settles in a patch of low vegetation. Somewhere nearby, a feathered raptor moves along the base of a slope. Its body is not huge enough to shake the ground. It is not built for spectacle. It is built for a world where a missed step can matter. The Jadakta was not gentle. Sandstorms could strip surfaces and bury others. Rainstorms, when they came, could turn dry channels into sudden flows. Animals in burrows could drown. Animals on slopes could be caught by collapsing sediment. A nest that survived heat and predators could be lost under sand. The same environment that preserved the record was an active hazard in life. To live there was to read subtle changes: wind, smell, cloud, the firmness of the ground. The famous fighting dinosaur specimen was found at Tugrugin Shiri, another important Jadakta locality. It preserves Velociraptor and Protoceratops in contact so intimate that it has been described for decades as direct evidence of dinosaur combat. The Velociraptor's foot is near the Protoceratops' neck region, and the Protoceratops clamps the raptor's arm. One interpretation suggests the herbivore broke the predator's arm before both animals were buried. Whether the encounter began as predation, defense, or something more complicated, the fossil shows interaction, not isolated anatomy. Even this fossil should not be over-narrated. The bodies could have shifted slightly during burial. Muscles and skin are gone. The precise sequence of events is unrecoverable. But the broad fact remains extraordinary. 2 dinosaurs from different sides of the food web died in physical contact. Paleontologists are rarely given behavior with this level of directness. Most behavior must be inferred from bone shape, trackways, nests, wear marks, or injuries. Here, a single slab places predator and prey together in one moment. The fossil is quiet now. It has no dust storm around it, no sound of breathing, no struggle. The animals are held in museum light or protected storage, their last motion converted into stillness. People stand before them and see a fight because the bones still point toward action. But the stone also says something else. It says that the event ended before either animal could become legend in its own world. Only burial made it visible to ours. That is one reason Velociraptor matters beyond its fame. It is one of the few dinosaurs whose behavior can be discussed with more than general speculation. We have its bones. We have its family context. We have evidence of feathers. We have a fossil interaction with another dinosaur. We have its sedimentary environment. We can place it in a real landscape, with real neighbors, at a real interval of deep time. The animal becomes less vague with every line of evidence. The skull was about a quarter of the body length if the tail is excluded, long and narrow compared with the deeper skulls of many predatory dinosaurs. The snout was slightly upturned in some reconstructions, giving the head a distinctive profile. The teeth were numerous and serrated, but smaller than the teeth of large theropods. The jaw muscles did not produce tyrannosaur-level force. They did not need to. Velociraptor relied on a combination of speed, grip, cutting teeth, forelimb claws, and the sickle claws of the feet. It was a predator built from multiple moderate weapons rather than one overwhelming bite. Its forelimb claws were sharp and functional. The hands could not rotate like ours, but they could grasp inward. The arms were relatively long for a non-avian theropod. In a feathered animal, those limbs also had a visual presence. When folded, they may have made the body look compact. When opened, they could enlarge the outline quickly. In modern animals, sudden expansion of body outline can startle rivals or prey, and it can signal threat. We cannot know exactly how Velociraptor used its feathered arms in display, but the anatomy makes display plausible. Color is one of the missing parts. Some exceptionally preserved dinosaurs reveal microscopic structures that can hint at color, but Velociraptor does not currently offer that kind of evidence. Artists often choose sandy browns, reds, stripes, or mottled patterns to fit the Gobi environment. Those choices are reasonable possibilities, not facts. The animal might have carried muted camouflage across the body and brighter feathers on the arms or tail. It might have had sexual differences in plumage. Or it might have been visually simpler. The bones do not say. Restraint is important because a scientifically accurate animal is not the same as an over-decorated one. Feathers do not require bright colors. Display does not require peacock-like extravagance. Many living birds are subtle in color and still use posture, movement, and contrast. A desert predator could benefit from blending into sand and scrub while still having markings visible at close range. The safest reconstruction is not plain or spectacular by default. It is one that admits what is known and where the unknown begins. Sound is another uncertainty. Velociraptor did not roar like a mammal in a monster film. Its vocal apparatus is unknown. Birds make sound in ways crocodilians do not, and non-avian dinosaurs may have had a range of calls, hisses, booms, or closed-mouth vocalizations depending on lineage. We cannot give Velociraptor a precise voice. It may have communicated through low calls, threat sounds, visual posture, or feather display. In a dry landscape, sound carries differently across open ground. A short call near dusk could travel over sand before fading into wind. Silence, though, may have mattered more. A hunting animal benefits from not being noticed. Feathers could soften the outline. Low posture could hide the body behind uneven ground. The long tail could steady careful steps. A lizard under a shrub would hear the faintest scrape. A Protoceratops adult would watch movement at the edge of vision. Velociraptor survived by closing distances before other animals reacted. That kind of life rewards control. The claws of the hands and feet were made of keratin sheaths in life, extending beyond the bony cores preserved in fossils. This means the living claws were longer and sharper than the bones alone suggest. The same is true for the beaks of Protoceratops and Oviraptorosaurs. Fossil skeletons often understate the living surfaces of animals. Horn sheaths, skin, muscle, feathers, fat, and cartilage complete the body. A mounted skeleton is an essential framework, but it is not the whole animal. Put those missing tissues back, and the raptor changes. The chest fills. The neck becomes more flexible in appearance. The face gains lips or soft tissues around the teeth depending on the reconstruction. Feathers cover the body and arms. The tail may carry a fan or patches of longer plumage. The animal becomes less skeletal, less monstrous, and more like a living creature that could sleep curled in shade, shake sand from its feathers, and blink against grit in the wind. The question of lips in theropods is still discussed. Large theropods like Tyrannosaurus have been central to that debate, but smaller theropods raise similar issues. Teeth exposed in skeletal mounts do not necessarily mean teeth exposed in life. Many reptiles and birds show different soft tissue arrangements, and extinct theropods do not preserve those tissues often. For Velociraptor, a reasonable reconstruction should avoid the permanently snarling look unless evidence demands it. Its face may have been more covered, the teeth hidden when the mouth was closed. A closed mouth makes the animal less cinematic, but perhaps more real. Predators are not always baring teeth. Most of the time they breathe, watch, rest, groom, and conserve energy. A feathered velociraptor standing in the shade with its mouth closed and its eyes half narrowed against light may tell us more about life than any exaggerated pose. The Cretaceous was not a constant chase. It was days passing through heat, hunger, alertness, and brief decisions. There would have been grooming. Feathers require maintenance, and living birds spend much of their day aligning barbs, removing debris, and oiling plumage from specialized glands. We do not know the exact grooming behavior of Velociraptor, but an animal with feathers could not ignore them. Sand would collect. Parasites would bite. Broken feathers would reduce insulation or display value. A raptor crouched in shade, turning its head to work through the feathers of its arm, may be one of the most ordinary and accurate images we can imagine. The word ordinary matters here. Dinosaurs did not spend their entire lives in the behaviors that fossilized dramatically. They walked, rested, fed, drank, nested, avoided heat, and reacted to other animals. A fossil of combat is spectacular because combat is rare to preserve. A fossil of a skeleton curled in sediment may record sleep, death posture, or burial after collapse. Everyday life has to be reconstructed from living analogs and anatomy. It is not less important because it leaves fewer dramatic traces. The Gedocta Formation contains many Protoceratops remains, including groups of individuals that have been interpreted as possible social aggregations or nesting-related accumulations. Protoceratops itself varied through growth, with juveniles having smaller frills and adults developing broader skull ornamentation. This means Velociraptor did not encounter a single uniform prey animal. It encountered hatchlings, juveniles, subadults, and adults, each with different risks and opportunities. A small Protoceratops might be vulnerable. A fully grown adult with a strong beak could injure a predator badly. Predators often select prey based on vulnerability rather than size alone. A sick adult can be safer than a healthy juvenile if the juvenile is guarded. A nest can be profitable if the adult is away, and deadly if it is not. A carcass can feed a predator without a chase, but may attract competitors. Velociraptor's hunting choices would have depended on weather, hunger, age, injury, and opportunity. Fossils tell us what was possible. They do not record every decision. A Protoceratops' beak was not a harmless mouth. It was a cutting tool backed by jaw muscles and body weight. In the Fighting Dinosaurs fossil, the Protoceratops appears to have bitten the Velociraptor's arm. If that interpretation is right, it shows the herbivore using its head as a defensive weapon at close range. For a predator with relatively slender forelimbs, that kind of bite could be disabling. A broken arm might mean a failed hunt, infection, starvation, or vulnerability to another predator. The arms of Velociraptor look long and capable, but they were not disposable. They helped grasp, balance, display, and perhaps shield the body or young. Injury to one arm could change how the animal hunted. A predator with a damaged limb might switch to scavenging, take smaller prey, or die if the injury was too severe. Healed injuries in fossils can show survival after trauma. Unhealed injuries can mark the cause or circumstances of death. Bone becomes the record of risk. The Gedocta sandstones preserve animals in 3 dimensions more often than fine flattened lake deposits, but the bones can still be crushed, distorted, or incomplete. Skulls may be flattened. Thin bones may break. Limbs may shift before burial is complete. Preparing such fossils requires patience. Sediment is removed grain by grain. Fragile surfaces are stabilized. Sometimes the preparator sees details no field worker could see at the quarry, because the fossil reveals itself only after months or years of careful work. Preparation is another quiet part of paleontology. A fossil discovered in a cliff is not immediately a scientific animal. It becomes readable through labor. Tools hum. Brushes clear dust. A jacket of plaster is opened. Red sandstone gives way to bone. Measurements are taken. Photographs are made. Drawings record shapes that photographs can miss. A single ulna with small bumps can change how millions of people picture a dinosaur, but only if someone sees the bumps and understands what they mean. Those quill knobs are among the smallest details with the largest consequences in the story of Velociraptor. A row of raised marks on a forearm does not look dramatic. It is not a claw in the throat of another dinosaur. It is not a skull emerging from a cliff, yet it overturns an image that dominated for decades. It tells us the animal carried feathers strongly enough anchored to leave marks on bone. It turns the raptor from a naked reptile into a feathered theropod in the closest possible way, not through guesswork, but through anatomy. The feather evidence also links Velociraptor to the larger question of what feathers were for. If a flightless predator had long arm feathers, then those feathers were doing something other than powered flight. They may have helped with display. They may have protected eggs or young. They may have helped balance the body during rapid movement. They may have been inherited from ancestors in which feathers served several roles at once. Evolution often preserves structures after their original function changes, and feathers are one of the best examples. In living birds, the large secondary feathers of the wing attach along the ulna. Quill knobs are not present in every bird, even when feathers exist, but when they are present, they provide strong evidence for substantial feathers. Finding comparable structures in Velociraptor means the forelimb feathers were not tiny filaments alone. They were large enough to require firm attachment. The animal was too large and its arms too short for flight, but not too large for feathers. Flightlessness does not remove feathers from ostriches, emus, penguins, or many extinct birds. It did not remove them from Velociraptor. This does not mean every drawing should give Velociraptor the same feather arrangement as a hawk. The exact length, shape, and distribution of feathers remain uncertain. A good reconstruction uses the quill knobs, the relatives, and the animal's proportions to make a cautious estimate. The arms probably carried longer feathers. The body probably had insulating plumage. The head and legs may have had a mix of feathers and scaly skin. Beyond that, artists and scientists must mark the boundary between evidence and interpretation. The tail is another place where feathers may have mattered. Some dromaeosaurs and early birds had tail feathers used in display or aerodynamic control. Velociraptor's tail was long and stiffened, already useful for balance. If it carried a fan or paired feathers near the tip, those feathers could have added visual signals during courtship, threat, or species recognition. We do not have direct evidence of a Velociraptor tail fan, but the possibility fits the broader feathered context. It should be shown as possible, not guaranteed. Species recognition matters in environments where related animals overlap. A display feather, a head motion, a tail posture, or a call can prevent wasted conflict or help individuals find mates of the right species. Fossils preserve skull crests, horns, frills, plates, and feathers in many dinosaur lineages, all of which may have had display roles. Velociraptor lacks a giant crest or horn. Its display may have been subtler, built from posture, feather movement, color, and the body language of a small active predator. A threat display does not require a roar. The animal might lift its arms slightly, spread the feathers, open its mouth, raise the head, and angle the tail. A rival approaching a carcass would read the signal through motion and size. The exchange could end without contact. Fighting is costly, especially for animals that need intact limbs to hunt. Display often evolves because it prevents some fights, not because it makes animals look impressive to us. The stiffened tail could also help during rapid turns. In a chase across uneven sand, the body must change direction without falling. A long tail works like a counterbalance, shifting angular momentum as the animal moves. Modern animals with long tails, from cats to lizards, use them in balance and maneuvering. Velociraptor's tail was more constrained than a cat's, but its length and structure would still have influenced movement. A small predator chasing a lizard or juvenile dinosaur would benefit from stability. Footprints, if we could watch them form, would tell a simple story. 2 weight-bearing toes press into the damp sand. The lifted second toe leaves no deep sickle mark. The tail does not drag. The body passes forward. A few minutes later, wind begins softening the edges. By the next day, the surface may be gone. For a track to survive, it must be covered gently and quickly enough to protect it. Most steps vanish. Only rare ones become evidence. The Jadocta Formation is Campanian in age, part of the late Cretaceous. The exact dating of continental deposits can be difficult, and different localities within the formation and related units may not be identical in age. Broadly, Velociraptor mongoliensis lived around the interval often given as roughly 75 to 71 million years ago, though popular sources sometimes use 80 million years as a rounded figure for Jadocta fossils. For narration, the important point is that this animal lived near the end of the dinosaur age, long after the Jurassic, but before the final extinction. Time in this part of the Cretaceous should not be compressed too much. A few million years is longer than the entire span of human evolution in many definitions. Species can appear, change, spread, and vanish within intervals that sound small when placed against deep time. Velociraptor's world was not a single frozen day. The Jadocta ecosystem itself changed as dunes moved, water shifted, climate varied, and animal populations came and went. Fossils sample moments within that moving landscape. The late Cretaceous was the last great act of non-avian dinosaur history. Elsewhere, tyrannosaurs grew into apex predators. Horned dinosaurs diversified. Hadrosaurs formed vast herbivore communities. Flowering plants spread through many ecosystems. Birds became more varied. In Mongolia, different formations record different habitats, from drier dune systems to wetter river-dominated environments in later deposits. Velociraptor belongs to one of the dry chapters, an animal adapted to a world that was not ruled by giants, but by survival at smaller scales. The title Real Velociraptor can sound like a correction, and it is partly that. It corrects size, it corrects skin, it corrects time period, it corrects behavior that has been inflated beyond evidence. But the correction is not meant to make the animal less impressive. The real Velociraptor is not disappointing because it was smaller. A hawk is not disappointing because it is smaller than a lion. Different predators are built for different worlds. A feathered raptor the size of a wolf or large bird, moving through red sand with a sickle claw held off the ground, is enough. It does not need to open doors. It does not need to hunt humans. It does not need to be scaled up into a villain. The animal that actually lived is more specific, and specificity is where deep time becomes real. Popular culture borrowed the name Velociraptor and attached it to an animal closer in size and shape to Deinonychus, another dromaeosaur from North America. That choice made sense for a thriller, but it created a lasting confusion. Deinonychus was larger, more powerfully built, and central to the scientific revival of dinosaurs as active animals in the 20th century. Velociraptor was smaller and Asian. Both belonged to the same larger family. They were relatives, not the same animal. The famous screen raptor is a hybrid of science, drama, and convenience. Deinonychus also helped change how dinosaurs were understood. Its anatomy suggested agility, predatory coordination, and an active metabolism. The broader dinosaur renaissance moved dinosaurs away from the old image of sluggish reptiles and toward dynamic, bird-related animals. Velociraptor benefited from that shift even before feather evidence became direct. Once feathers were confirmed, the change became deeper. The raptor was not only active, it was part of the feathered theropod radiation that connects non-avian dinosaurs to birds. Science sometimes changes an animal by removing exaggeration. Then, it changes it again by adding detail. First, Velociraptor becomes smaller. Then, it becomes feathered. Then its habitat becomes dry and specific. Then its behavior becomes less like a coordinated movie pack and more like the flexible life of a real predator. At each step, the animal loses some myth and gains some reality. Reality also includes the weather. Summer heat on open sand can be severe. A feathered body may seem poorly suited to heat at first, but feathers can insulate against heat as well as cold, shading skin and reducing direct solar gain. Birds in deserts use posture, feather position, panting, shade, and activity timing to manage temperature. Velociraptor may have avoided the hottest part of the day, becoming more active in morning and late afternoon. Its feathers were not necessarily a burden. They may have been part of its climate control. The exact metabolism of Velociraptor is not directly measurable in the way a living animal's metabolism is, but theropods close to birds were likely more active and physiologically dynamic than traditional cold-blooded reptile models suggested. Bone histology, growth rates, respiratory anatomy, and bird relationships all point toward elevated metabolism in many dinosaurs. Velociraptor was probably not a sluggish animal waiting for sun to warm it before moving. It was likely capable of sustained activity, though still shaped by heat, water, and food availability. Night in the Geoducta would have changed the risks. Temperatures fall quickly in dry environments. Small mammals become active. Insects move. Predators listen. A feathered covering would help retain heat. Vision and smell become more important as light fades. Velociraptor may have hunted in low light, though we cannot say exactly how nocturnal it was. Some predators split their activity between dawn, dusk, and night to avoid heat and competition. The desert rewards animals that choose their hours carefully. A raptor at night would be harder to see than the animal in museum art. It would be a low shape moving between darker shrubs, the tail a line behind it, the head turning towards sound. Its feathers might make the outlines soft. The sickle claw remains lifted until the moment it is needed. Farther away, Protoceratops breathe in a group, bodies dark against paler sand. The Cretaceous continues without spectacle, minute by minute. The teeth of Velociraptor were replaced during life, as in other dinosaurs. Tooth replacement is essential for animals that bite bone, flesh, scales, and tough tissue. Worn or broken teeth could be shed and replaced by new ones developing in the jaw. Isolated teeth in fossil deposits can show predator presence even when skeletons are absent. A tooth lost during feeding may fall into sediment near a carcass, later becoming a small but useful clue about who fed there. Bite marks are another kind of evidence. On bones, they can show feeding, scavenging, or predation. Matching a bite mark to a species is not always easy, especially when multiple predators share similar teeth. But patterns of marks, spacing, and associated fossils help. For Velociraptor, the most famous interaction remains the fighting dinosaurs rather than a broad record of bite-marked bones. Still, its teeth show that flesh was part of its diet, and its environment supplied many sources. A carcass in dry country changes quickly. The smell spreads. Insects arrive. Small scavengers test soft tissue. Larger animals approach with caution. If the carcass belongs to a Protoceratops, it may feed several predators over hours or days. A Velociraptor can tear strips of flesh, retreat, return, and defend a position briefly if another raptor appears. Sand begins to collect against the body. If burial comes fast enough, part of the carcass may enter the fossil record. If not, it disappears. Scavenging should not be treated as weakness. Many powerful predators scavenge when the chance is available. Lions, wolves, bears, eagles, crocodiles, and hyenas all use carrion. Meat is meat, and a dead animal is safer than a living one. Velociraptor almost certainly scavenged when it could. It also hunted. The boundary between hunter and scavenger is usually a matter of opportunity, not identity. The same animal that steals a lizard from under a root can feed from a dead Protoceratops later in the day. The same jaws that open a wound can strip a carcass. The same claw that helps pin a struggling animal can grip a slick surface while feeding. Modern ecosystems do not divide animals into clean categories, and ancient ones did not either. What did Velociraptor smell in that world? Dry sand. Warm feathers. The musk of small mammals, damp sediment after rain. Blood at a carcass. The resin scent of conifer-like plants. The sharp odor of disturbed soil at a nest. Smell is difficult to fossilize directly, but the skull and living comparisons remind us that ancient landscapes were not only visual. They had textures, heat, pressure, and odor. An animal moving through them perceived a world very different from the quiet display of bones in a museum. The brain of Velociraptor was larger relative to its body than in many older dinosaur groups, though it should not be exaggerated into human-like cleverness. Dromaeosaurs were likely capable, alert animals with sensory and motor coordination suited to active predation. They learned from their environments in the way many predators do. They recognized threats, prey, perhaps individual rivals, and familiar routes. Intelligence in such an animal is practical. It is measured in survival, not in puzzles. The eyes were positioned to give some binocular overlap, useful for judging distance during a leap or strike. The inner ear can offer clues about head posture and balance in fossil animals, though interpretations vary. The neck was flexible, allowing quick head movements. The body, tail, feet, and arms formed a coordinated system. Velociraptor was not a pair of jaws mounted on legs. It was a whole predatory machine, with each part contributing to movement and control. Watch a heron strike at a fish, or a secretary bird stomp at prey in grass, or a hawk pin something beneath its feet. None of these birds is Velociraptor, but each shows how feathers, balance, talons, and precise timing can belong to predators that do not need massive size. The living world gives hints, not direct answers. A good reconstruction listens to those hints without forcing one living animal onto another. The secretary bird is especially tempting because it kills with its feet, but it is a modern bird with its own anatomy and history. Velociraptor had a different foot, different tail, different teeth, and a different environment. Comparisons should illuminate, not replace evidence. The goal is not to find the modern Velociraptor. There is none. The goal is to understand what kind of dinosaur the bones allow. Some older restorations show dromaeosaurs using the sickle claw to disembowel large prey. That image may be too simple. Curved claws are often better at gripping than slicing open long wounds. The keratin sheath would have been sharp, but the mechanics of puncturing, holding, and controlling prey may have mattered more than a sweeping slash. In the fighting dinosaur specimen, the claw's placement near the Protoceratops' neck suggests close contact, not a distant kick. The predator was engaged, and that engagement came with danger. Close contact is the most dangerous part of predation. The prey can bite, kick, roll, crush, twist, or drag the predator into bad ground. A velociraptor attacking an adult Protoceratops would have to commit its body, not just its teeth. If it jumped, it risked falling. If it pinned, it risked being pinned back. If its arm entered the beak's reach, bone could break. The fossil makes sense because it shows a struggle, not an effortless kill. There are few fossils in the world that make predator and prey so immediate. The La Brea tar pits preserve many predator victims of traps, but not usually one predator locked against one prey animal in a single Mesozoic instant. Trackways can show pursuit, but often the animals never meet. Bite marks show contact after the fact. The fighting dinosaurs fossil holds contact itself. It is not a full video of the past. It is one frame, but a frame with astonishing clarity. The frame has influenced art, books, museum displays, and the public image of raptors. Yet the fossil is also easy to overuse. One extraordinary encounter does not define every velociraptor. It does not prove all raptors specialized in adult Protoceratops. It does not prove every hunt ended in grappling combat. It proves that such an encounter could happen, and that in at least one case it ended under collapsing sand. The sand matters as much as the animals. Without it, there is no fossil. Without rapid burial, scavengers might have separated the bodies. Wind and water might have scattered the bones. Sun might have cracked them. The fight would have ended, decayed, and vanished. Instead, sediment closed over it quickly enough to turn a desperate moment into one of the most famous dinosaur fossils ever found. Sand avalanches in dune environments can occur when slopes become unstable, especially after rain changes the weight and cohesion of sediment. A dune face can collapse suddenly, burying animals before they escape. Some Geodocta fossils preserve postures that suggest animals caught in sand and struggling upward. These interpretations are debated in details, but the general point is clear. This environment could entomb animals rapidly. The same dry basin that seems hostile to preservation produced extraordinary fossils because its hazards buried bodies whole. The red color of the rock comes from iron minerals oxidized in the sediment, giving many Geodocta exposures their distinctive desert tone. The flaming cliffs earned their English name because low sunlight makes the cliffs glow. These cliffs are not only beautiful, they are pages of sediment stacked by wind, weather, and time. Each layer records conditions that existed long before humans, horses, camels, or the modern Gobi ecosystem. Fossils weather out because the cliffs are still being shaped. A cliff face in evening light can look still, but it is slowly moving. Grains loosen, slopes crumble, bones appear, bones disappear. The landscape reveals the Cretaceous by eroding itself. Paleontology in such a place requires patience and timing. A fossil is found because rock gives it back, and because someone is there before the desert takes it again. Fieldwork begins with walking. Not dramatic digging at first, but walking and looking. The eye learns the difference between stone and bone, between a mineral streak and a fossil surface. A fragment of eggshell has a different texture. A tooth catches light differently from a pebble. The end of a long bone may show a pattern inside that ordinary rock does not have. In the Gobi, a discovery can begin as a small shape at boot level. A Velociraptor skeleton may not emerge all at once. A claw appears, then toe bones, then a line of metatarsals. The quarry expands slowly. Sediment is cleared. Fragile parts are left supported until they can be jacketed. Notes record orientation and position. Photographs capture the fossil before removal. The animal's scientific value depends on this context. A bone removed without notes becomes less informative, even if it looks impressive. This is why legal, documented collecting matters. Paleontology is not treasure hunting in the simple sense. A fossil is not just an object. It is data embedded in a geological situation. Removing it carelessly can destroy the evidence needed to understand age, environment, behavior, or association with other animals. For a dinosaur like Velociraptor, whose story depends on place, context is essential. Mongolia's fossil heritage has been threatened by illegal trade, but it has also been defended by scientists, authorities, and museums working to repatriate important specimens. The return of smuggled fossils in recent years has reminded the public that dinosaur bones are not ownerless curiosities. They come from landscapes and nations. They carry scientific information that belongs in public trust, where they can be studied, displayed responsibly, and protected for future generations. The original Velociraptor material was found during the Central Asiatic expeditions of the American Museum of Natural History. The holotype included a skull and claw material from the Flaming Cliffs region. Later expeditions recovered more complete specimens, allowing paleontologists to understand the animal in greater detail. The fighting dinosaur specimen came from later Polish-Mongolian fieldwork. The scientific picture of Velociraptor was built over decades, not from one discovery alone. That picture continues to change because each new related fossil changes the comparison. A new feathered dromaeosaur in China can affect how Velociraptor is restored. A new analysis of forelimb motion can alter interpretations of prey capture. A revised study of Geodocta sedimentology can change how paleontologists imagine the habitat. The animal itself is gone, but the scientific reconstruction is alive. It changes as evidence improves. This can be frustrating if someone wants one fixed image. It is also the reason paleontology remains compelling. A dinosaur is not discovered once and finished. It is discovered again each time the evidence is re-examined. Velociraptor has been a small predator, a cinematic monster, a bird-like hunter, a feathered desert animal, and a case study in how public images lag behind fossils. The bones have stayed the same. Our ability to read them has changed. Look closely at the skull, and the animal becomes more specific. The snout is long, with openings that reduce weight. The orbit is large enough to suggest strong visual reliance. The lower jaw is slender but armed. The teeth curve backward, helping hold struggling prey. The neck attaches in a way that allows the head to dart and pull. This is not the skull of an animal designed to crush through heavy bone. It is the skull of an animal designed to seize, cut, and manage prey with precision. The body behind that skull was light enough for speed, but not fragile in the sense of weakness. Bird bones are light and strong because they are engineered around stresses. Theropod bones often show hollow spaces and thin walls, reducing weight without removing necessary strength. Velociraptor inherited this architecture. In life, muscles wrapped those bones, feathers covered the outline, and the animal carried itself with the active posture of a theropod. Its danger came from coordination, a rush from cover, a leap or close lunge, feet reaching, claws engaging, jaws biting, arms grasping or balancing, tail countering the shift of weight. If the prey was small, the encounter might end quickly. If the prey was large, the same movements could become a struggle. The predator's success depended on choosing moments when the odds favored it. This is why the term killer claw can be useful but misleading. It names the obvious weapon while hiding the rest of the animal. A claw without balance is useless. A claw without muscle is useless. A claw without judgment gets its owner killed. Velociraptor's second toe was spectacular, but its effectiveness came from the integrated body: eyes, brain, legs, tail, arms, jaws, feathers, and behavior. The tail's stiffening rods are called presygapophyses and chevrons in anatomical language, elongated structures associated with the vertebrae. They helped support the tail and limit flexibility in some directions. This created a balancing structure that could still move at the base. The animal could not curl the tail like a cat, but it could use it as a dynamic counterweight. In reconstructions, a drooping tail dragging on the ground is wrong. The tail was held out, active and clear of the sand. A tail held above the ground leaves no line behind the tracks. The animal passes, and only the feet mark the surface. The tail follows like a shadow with weight. This is one of the small corrections that makes dinosaurs feel alive. They were not dragging themselves through their world. They were walking over it. How fast Velociraptor could run is difficult to state with confidence. Estimates depend on limb proportions, muscle reconstruction, body mass, and assumptions about posture. It was likely quick and agile, but exact top speeds are less important than functional movement. A predator in uneven sandy terrain needs acceleration, balance, and turning ability more than a straight-line sprint across a perfect surface. Short bursts may have mattered more than endurance. A chase lasting only seconds can decide whether an animal eats. The Geodocta ground was not a racetrack. Some surfaces were firm crust, others were loose sand. Some were cut by dry channels or dotted with vegetation. A small animal could disappear into a burrow or behind a low rise. A Protoceratops could turn and present its beak. A raptor moving through this terrain would have adjusted its gait constantly. Speed in life is not a number alone. It is a relationship between body and ground. Imagine the animal slowing as it reaches a slope. Its toes spread slightly into the sand. Its head lowers. Its tail shifts. A gust moves across the surface and erases the sharp edges of older tracks. The raptor pauses, not because the scene demands drama, but because real animals pause. They listen. They test. They wait for the next piece of information. Velociraptor's long metatarsals helped make the lower leg efficient for rapid movement. Its body mass was low enough that acceleration was possible without the extreme stresses faced by giant theropods. The hip and thigh muscles powered the stride, while the lower leg and foot transferred force to the ground. The lifted second toe changed the foot's contact pattern, but not in a way that prevented normal walking or running. The animal moved on the third and fourth toes, keeping the sickle claw free. The claw itself was probably not held straight upward at all times like an ornament. It had a range of motion. In relaxed positions, it may have been angled upward and inward, with the keratin sheath clearing the ground. During an attack, tendons and muscles could flex it downward. Fossil joints can suggest movement, but soft tissues determine much of the final range. Reconstructions should show capability without turning every step into a pose. A living velociraptor would not be constantly displaying its weapons. Most of the time, the claw was simply part of the foot. The animal walked, scratched, shifted balance, rested, and rose again. Only in certain moments did the claw become central: grappling, threat, mating display perhaps, or competition. Weapons in animals spend much of their time unused, and that unused time is still part of life. The arms invite similar restraint. They were not useless because they were smaller than the legs. They were not wings because they carried feathers. They were forelimbs in transition only from our point of view. To the animal, they were complete structures serving current functions. Grasping, balance, display, shielding, and possibly prey control all fit the evidence better than a single dramatic explanation. Evolution does not design with future birds in mind. It modifies bodies for present survival. Yet from the distance of deep time, those present functions become part of a larger transformation. The same anatomical region that helped Velociraptor grasp and display would, in other theropod lineages, become the wing. The same feathers that insulated or signaled would, in other bodies, become flight surfaces. The same folded wrist would help birds draw their wings against the body. Velociraptor did not fly, but it lived close to the evolutionary machinery that made flight possible. Archaeopteryx had already lived by this time, far earlier in the late Jurassic. By Velociraptor's age, birds and bird-like dinosaurs had been diversifying for tens of millions of years. The Cretaceous world contained many experiments in feathered movement. Some animals glided. Some flew. Some remained terrestrial. Some used feathers for display or brooding. Velociraptor represents one branch among many, a ground-running predator whose feathers remind us that flight is only one chapter in feather evolution. A feather does not need to leave the ground to matter. It can hold warmth over a sleeping body. It can shade skin in sun. It can make an arm look larger when raised. It can cover eggs. It can carry color. It can break the outline of the body among scrub. The feathered velociraptor is not a failed bird. It is a successful dinosaur, using feathers in its own way. The old image of scales and naked skin is difficult to remove because it is simple. A scaly raptor looks like a reptilian weapon. A feathered raptor asks for more thought. It mixes categories that culture kept separate: bird and reptile, familiar and alien, delicate and dangerous. But nature has never cared about those categories. A cassowary can be feathered and dangerous. An eagle can be beautiful and violent. A velociraptor could be feathered and still capable of driving its claws into prey. The feathers may even make the animal more unsettling in a truthful way. They bring it closer to living things we know. They make it less like a fantasy reptile and more like something that could move, watch, breathe, and make choices. The distance between a hawk's foot and a raptor's foot is large, but not meaningless. Both belong to predatory bodies shaped by balance, grasping, and precision. The evolutionary relationship between birds and dromaeosaurs does not mean birds descended from Velociraptor specifically. Birds come from small feathered theropods, and dromaeosaurs are close relatives within that broader Maniraptoran world. Velociraptor is more like a cousin near the bird line than a direct ancestor of modern birds. This distinction matters. Evolution is a branching tree, not a ladder. Many branches carry similar traits because they inherited them from shared ancestors. Saying birds are dinosaurs is accurate because birds are nested within Theropoda, the dinosaur group that includes animals like Velociraptor, Allosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus at different distances. But saying every bird descends from Velociraptor is not accurate. The living sparrow is not a Velociraptor that survived. It is a dinosaur whose lineage split from relatives like dromaeosaurs long before. The resemblance is family resemblance, not direct descent. Still, the family resemblance can be felt. A crow walking with quick steps on a roadside, head tilting, eyes alert, feathers shifting in wind, carries a small piece of the same ancient architecture. Not the same animal, not the same world, but a living thread through a history that once included the red dunes of Mongolia and the sickle claws of raptors. The Cretaceous ended about 66 million years ago with the asteroid impact and its aftermath, but Velociraptor may have disappeared before that final boundary. Fossil evidence suggests the genus did not necessarily persist to the very end. Species come and go within the Cretaceous long before the mass extinction. The disappearance of Velociraptor was likely tied to ordinary evolutionary turnover, environmental change, shifting faunas, or replacement by other animals, though the exact reasons are not known. Its world did not need an asteroid to change. This is another important correction. Extinction is not only the final catastrophe, it happens constantly in deep time. A local environment shifts, a prey species declines, a competitor spreads. Climate patterns move. A lineage that was once successful becomes rare and then absent. By the time the asteroid struck, many dinosaur species had already risen and vanished. Velociraptor was one thread in that larger turnover. In later Mongolian deposits, the environment changes. The Nemegt Formation, for example, records wetter river systems and larger animals, including giants like Tarbosaurus and large hadrosaurs. That is a different Cretaceous Mongolia from the dry Jadakta world. The Gobi fossil record is not one habitat repeated for 30 million years. It is a sequence of changing landscapes. Velociraptor belongs to the dune and semi-arid chapter, not the broad river floodplains of the later Nemegt. Keeping those formations separate helps prevent a common mistake. Dinosaurs from the same country did not all live together. Tarbosaurus, Velociraptor, Dinocaris, Protoceratops, Oviraptor, and other Mongolian dinosaurs come from different rocks and sometimes different times. Some overlapped broadly, others did not. A scientifically grounded reconstruction respects formation, age, and locality. It places animals in the worlds their fossils actually record. A desert velociraptor standing beside a late Nemegt river giant would be like placing animals from different chapters on the same page. It may be visually exciting, but it blurs history. The real power of the Mongolian record comes from its sequence. It shows how Cretaceous ecosystems changed across time, from dry dune fields to richer river systems, from smaller desert faunas to larger, wetter communities. The Jadakta itself feels intimate because its animals are often within human scale. Protoceratops is not a towering horned giant. Oviraptorosaurs are not immense. Velociraptor is smaller than its reputation. Mammals and lizards are small enough to fit in the hand. This scale allows the lost world to be imagined close to the ground. A nest in sand, a skull in a ravine wall, a feathered predator moving behind low plants. The scene is not less ancient because it is smaller. Protoceratops may have been one of the most important herbivores in this environment. Its abundance in the fossil record suggests it was common, though fossil abundance can be affected by preservation and collecting. It had a strong skull, a beak for cropping plants, cheek teeth for processing food, and a frill that may have played roles in display, species recognition, or muscle attachment. For Velociraptor, Protoceratops was likely both a food source and a threat, depending on age and situation. Some scientists have suggested that the fighting dinosaurs encounter may have involved nest defense, perhaps a Protoceratops responding to a Velociraptor near eggs. This is plausible, but not proven. The fossil itself does not preserve a nest between them, it preserves the two animals. The nest defense idea fits broader behavior seen in living animals and the nesting richness of the formation, but it remains an interpretation. The best narration lets it remain an interpretation. If a nest was involved, the scene becomes more dangerous, not less. An adult defending eggs or young may accept risks it would avoid under other circumstances. A predator approaching a nest may be hungry enough to take its own risks. A sudden collapse of sand could trap both animals before either could retreat. But even without a nest, the struggle is intense. A predator and a horned herbivore are locked together in an environment that can bury them without warning. The fossil does not tell us what either animal felt. That kind of language belongs to story, not science. But it tells us that their bodies met, strained, and failed to separate before burial. Sometimes that is enough. Bone positions, broken limbs, and claws near neck bones are not emotions. They are physical facts, and the physical facts carry their own weight. The preservation of the fighting dinosaurs also shows why exceptional fossils must be studied in 3 dimensions. Position matters. The relationship of one limb to another matters. The sediment around the bodies matters. A specimen like this is not simply a pair of skeletons. It is a fossilized event, and events are fragile in interpretation. Preparation, imaging, casting, and careful description all become part of protecting the evidence from our desire to make it too simple. Around that event were countless other events never fossilized. A raptor drinking at a temporary pool, a Protoceratops calf stumbling after adults, a lizard darting into shade, a mammal pushing through plant litter at night, an oviraptorosaur settling over eggs as wind rises, a storm building beyond the dunes. Any one of these could have been a fossil under the right conditions. Most were not. The ancient world we know is a biased sample of the ancient world that was. Bias is unavoidable in paleontology. Hard parts preserve better than soft tissues. Larger bones are easier to find than tiny bones. Certain environments preserve fossils more often than others. Fine lake sediments can preserve feathers, desert sandstones can preserve 3-dimensional skeletons and sudden burial events. The absence of evidence in one deposit may reflect preservation rather than biology. This is why Velociraptor's quill knobs are so valuable. They survive in a deposit that usually does not show feathers directly. When reconstructing the animal, the safest approach is to combine direct evidence from Velociraptor with evidence from close relatives and living birds, while avoiding claims that go beyond both. Direct evidence says it had quill knobs and therefore substantial forelimb feathers. Close relatives suggest broader plumage. Anatomy suggests a terrestrial predator with grasping hands, a stiffened tail, and a raised sickle claw. The Jadocta sediments suggest a dry, dune-influenced habitat. Together, these lines make a coherent animal. Coherent does not mean complete. We do not know its exact colors. We do not know its calls. We do not know whether it formed pair bonds, defended territories, or hunted mostly at dawn. We do not know how often it attacked Protoceratops. We do not know the texture of its face in perfect detail. A good reconstruction leaves some parts unfilled, because emptiness is more honest than false certainty. The unknowns do not weaken the story, they give it depth. A fossil animal is always partly visible and partly hidden. Velociraptor comes into view through a claw, a skull, a forearm, a famous fight, a formation, and a family tree full of feathers. Around those clear points, there is space. That space is where careful imagination works, not to invent facts, but to connect them into a living scene. The living scene begins again at ground level. The sand is warm. A line of tracks crosses a damp patch left by rain. Some tracks are round and deep, made by a Protoceratops. Smaller prints cross them at an angle. Insects disturb the edge. The surface will not last long. Wind is already moving over it. But for a few hours, the ground holds the record of animals that have not yet become fossils. A second set of tracks appears beside the first. They are smaller, lighter, and spaced more closely. Perhaps they belong to a juvenile Protoceratops, perhaps to another small dinosaur entirely. The track maker is gone before the surface dries. A raptor crosses later and leaves only two main toe marks, the killing claw lifted out of the mud. In a few places, the impression is deeper on one side, showing a turn. That is how behavior can enter stone without bone. Most trackways never preserve the animal that made them, and most skeletons are not found with the animal's tracks. Paleontologists usually have to keep these records separate. A footprint records motion and surface. A skeleton records anatomy and death. When both lines can be compared across related animals, they enrich one another. The foot bones explain the missing sickle claw impression. The trackway explains how the foot met the ground. In the Geodocta, trackways are not the main source of Velociraptor knowledge, but thinking about tracks helps return the animal to movement. A skeleton alone can become too still. The living dinosaur crossed surfaces that changed under its weight. It slipped on loose slopes, found firmer ground along crusted flats, stepped over roots, and crouched when wind drove sand low across the surface. The word raptor itself means thief or Caesar in Latin, derived usage, and in dinosaurs it has become shorthand for dromaeosaurs. This shorthand can be useful, but it can also hide variation. Velociraptor, Deinonychus, Microraptor, Utahraptor, Dromaeosaurus, and their relatives were not interchangeable. They differed in size, habitat, skull shape, limb proportions, and likely behavior. The Mongolian Velociraptor was one raptor among many, specialized by its own history. A comparison with Microraptor shows how wide the family could become. Microraptor was smaller, from early Cretaceous China, and preserved with long feathers on both arms and legs. It may have glided or used its limbs in complex aerial movement. Velociraptor was larger, later, and terrestrial. Both were feathered dromaeosaurs. One explored the air or trees more deeply, the other remained a ground predator of dry country. A comparison with Utahraptor changes the scale again. Utahraptor, from North America, was a giant relative, far heavier than Velociraptor, with massive claws and a more imposing body. It lived earlier in the Cretaceous and in a different environment. Calling both animals raptors is technically useful, but the word should not make us imagine a single lifestyle. Evolution took the dromaeosaur body plan in multiple directions. Velociraptor is sometimes described as turkey-sized, and this is useful as a correction to movie scale, but it can be misleading if taken too literally. The animal was longer than a turkey because of its tail, with a more predatory skull and a different limb structure. It may have weighed more than many turkeys depending on estimate. The comparison works best to reduce exaggeration, not to replace one inaccurate image with another. A better way to picture its size is to separate length, height, and mass. The tail makes the animal long. The hip height keeps it relatively low. The body mass makes it manageable, not gigantic. A person standing near it would not be looking up at its head. The danger would come from speed and weapons close to the ground, not from towering over its surroundings. This size made it possible for Velociraptor to live in a different ecological layer from the giants of other dinosaur formations. It could move between shrubs, investigate burrows, take small prey, and use the broken terrain of dunes. Its body did not require enormous herds of large herbivores to feed it. It needed frequent opportunities, not massive kills. Smaller predators often live closer to detail. They notice holes, movements, scents, eggshell, insects, and the weakness of individual animals. They do not own the landscape in the way apex giants seem to. They thread through it. Velociraptor was famous to us, but in its own world it may have been one careful presence among many. The modern Gobi can make ancient life feel far away because it is so open and severe. But the ancient Jadakta was not simply the modern Gobi with dinosaurs added. Climates changed. Plants changed. Rivers and ponds appeared in different patterns. The rocks preserve a version of that region that existed under Cretaceous conditions. The modern desert exposes it, but does not perfectly duplicate it. A person standing at the flaming cliffs today sees goats, vehicles, tourists, researchers, and the wind moving over open ground. A velociraptor saw none of this. It saw low Cretaceous vegetation, other dinosaurs, reptiles, small mammals, and dune systems whose shapes would be familiar in principle, but not in detail. The rock is the bridge between those worlds. That bridge began forming when sand grains moved across the ancient basin. Each grain had its own history before becoming part of the formation. Some came from older rocks worn down by weather. Some were carried by wind, shifted again and again, then finally buried. In time, pressure and minerals turned loose sediment into sandstone. Bones inside became part of the same record. A raptor's toe and a dune grain entered deep time together. Sediment can preserve violence, but it can also preserve stillness. A nest covered before hatching. A lizard in a burrow. A mammal jaw in fine sand. An oviraptorosaur over eggs. These are not all the same kind of event, but they come to us through the same geological patience. The Jadakta is valuable because it captured many parts of an ecosystem, not only its most dramatic predator. If Velociraptor had never become famous, the animal would still matter scientifically. It would still show dromaeosaur anatomy in Asia. It would still provide evidence for feathers in a flightless predator. It would still be part of one of the clearest predator-prey fossils ever found. Fame adds attention, but the fossil evidence was important before the name became a public icon. The public icon can sometimes make the science harder to hear. Many people meet Velociraptor first as a large, scaly, intelligent villain. When the real animal is introduced, it sounds like a downgrade. Smaller, feathered, less organized, less monstrous. But those changes are not downgrades. They are corrections toward an animal that fits its bones, its family, and its world. There is no need for Velociraptor to be a genius to be compelling. Many successful predators are not unusually intelligent by human standards. They are tuned to their environments. A snake striking accurately, a heron waiting motionless, a fox listening under snow, and a falcon adjusting in flight all show intelligence as fit between body and world. Velociraptor's mind was likely practical in this sense. Nor does it need to be a pack hunter. Solitary predators can be highly successful. Many living carnivores hunt alone, even if they tolerate others at carcasses or gather during breeding seasons. If future evidence shows more complex social behavior in Velociraptor, the image can change. For now, the safest reconstruction is flexible rather than fixed, an animal capable of interacting with others, but not proven to hunt like wolves. A lone hunter is not a lesser hunter. It must solve every risk by itself. It cannot rely on partners to distract prey or share defense. It must decide when to commit and when to withdraw. In a dry basin, where injuries could be fatal and food could be uneven, that caution might be the difference between life and death. A pair of velociraptors near a carcass might not be cooperating at all. They might be tolerating each other because the carcass is large enough. They might be rivals. They might be a breeding pair. They might be unrelated animals drawn by smell. Without direct evidence, the same scene can carry multiple explanations. Paleontology often lives in this space between possibility and proof. This is why the best velociraptor story is not one of certainty piled on certainty. It is one of evidence arranged carefully. A real animal, in a real place. With known bones and known relatives, surrounded by unknowns that are acknowledged rather than filled with spectacle. That kind of story may be quieter, but it lasts longer. In the heat of afternoon, a raptor may rest with its body low, feathers slightly lifted to manage warmth. Dust gathers along the edges of the plumage. The eyes remain open. A fly moves near the face. Far off, a Protoceratops shifts its weight beside a patch of vegetation. Nothing happens for a long time. Then a small mammal breaks cover, and the stillness changes. The strike, if it comes, is brief. A lunge, a snap, a foot brought down, a tail correcting the body. If the prey escapes into a burrow, the moment is over. The raptor may dig briefly, listen, then give up. Energy is too valuable to waste. Another opportunity will come, or it will not. In that uncertainty, the animal continues. Even failed hunts leave no fossil record most of the time. No bone breaks, no tracks preserve, no dramatic burial follows. Yet failure shapes predators as much as success. It teaches caution. It selects for better timing, better senses, better movement. The Velociraptor preserved in stone is the product of countless unpreserved attempts by its lineage to feed and survive. Dromaeosaurs had teeth that were often more strongly serrated on one edge than another, depending on species, and tooth shape can help paleontologists identify isolated material. Velociraptor teeth were recurved and laterally compressed, suited for slicing. The jaws could process flesh but not chew in the mammalian sense. Food would be torn into manageable pieces and swallowed. Digestion did the rest. The digestive system is mostly absent from fossils, but theropod feeding can be inferred through anatomy and comparison. Like birds and reptiles, Velociraptor likely swallowed chunks, perhaps bones from small prey, perhaps feathers or scales, depending on the meal. Some modern birds produce pellets of indigestible material, but whether Velociraptor did anything similar is uncertain. The safe point is simpler. It was a carnivore with tools for seizing and cutting. A small mammal taken whole would leave little trace. A lizard might be swallowed in pieces. An egg could be opened with jaws and claws. A carcass would be fed on until the best tissues were gone or a larger animal forced retreat. These feeding events were ordinary parts of the ecosystem, each one transferring energy from prey, plant, or egg into the body of the predator. It is tempting to imagine Velociraptor as constantly hungry, but animals also spend time digesting. After a good meal, a predator may rest. Feathers settle. Breathing slows. The body turns food into repair, warmth, movement, and eventually reproduction. A dinosaur is not only what it kills, it is also what it builds from what it eats. Bone, muscle, eggs, feathers, and the energy to begin again. Feather growth requires resources. Replacing damaged feathers requires protein and time. Breeding requires energy. Maintaining muscle and immune function requires steady nutrition. In a seasonal dry environment, these demands would make food pulses important. Rain could increase plant growth. Plant growth could support herbivores and insects. Herbivores and insects could support predators. The whole system moved together, though not always smoothly. A drought year could reduce nests, weaken herbivores, and make carcasses more common for a while before making everything scarcer. A wet season could increase plant cover and small animal activity. Predators might breed more successfully after good conditions. These patterns are hard to prove for Velociraptor specifically, but they are reasonable dynamics in dry ecosystems. The animal lived inside cycles, not in a static museum diorama. The sky above that world may have held dust more often than clouds. When clouds did build, they could matter intensely. A storm could cool the air, send animals into shelter, fill channels, and destabilize dunes. Rain hitting dry ground releases scent. Tracks soften. Burrows flood. Nests become vulnerable. A predator that knows where water gathers may arrive before the surface dries. The moments after rain are among the most important in dry country. Plants absorb what they can. Insects emerge. Small animals forage. Herbivores move toward fresh growth. Predators follow the movement. The fossil record of sudden burial may owe much to these same storms. Life gathers around water, and danger gathers with it. A velociraptor walking after rain might leave clearer tracks than on dry sand. The lifted sickle claw would still be absent or faint. The other toes would press deeper. Mud could cling to the scales of the feet. Feathers along the lower body might dampen. The animal could shake itself like a bird, scattering droplets and grit. None of this is preserved directly, but it follows from the body in the environment. Some reconstructions give Velociraptor a very narrow, almost fox-like face. Others make the head deeper or the soft tissues fuller. The skull sets the limits, but soft tissue fills the final form. Muscles thickened the jaw region. Keratin sheaths extended the claws. Feathers changed the outline of the neck and body. Eyes, skin, fat, and cartilage altered the face. The fossil skull is the architecture, not the entire building. A living animal also changes shape with posture. A relaxed velociraptor would not look like the same animal as a threatened one. Feathers can be flattened or raised. The mouth can open or close. The neck can extend or draw back. The arms can fold or spread. The tail can angle with balance. Static art often chooses one iconic pose, but real animals shift from one shape to another throughout the day. This is one reason video reconstructions matter when done carefully. Movement can show how the body works as a system. A still image may overemphasize claws or teeth. Motion reveals weight, hesitation, balance, and adjustment. The real velociraptor was not a symbol, it was a sequence of movements. The first movement of morning might be simple. The animal rises from a sheltered hollow. Sand clings to feathers along one side. It shakes. The head turns. The tail lifts into line. The feet step onto cooler ground. For a moment, there is no hunt, no fight, no fossil. Only a dinosaur beginning another day in the Cretaceous. That day might carry it across the territory it knows, if territory is the right word. It may follow the same dune edges because prey often moves there. It may avoid open flats in heat. It may investigate a carcass remembered from the day before. It may pass the tracks of another raptor and respond with caution, interest, or aggression. The landscape is not mapped in words. It is mapped in scent, cover, food, and risk. A person watching from a distance would need time to recognize the animal. The feathers would make it less like the familiar skeleton. The head would be narrow. The arms would be folded. The tail would seem long, almost too long, until the animal turned and the tail explained itself. The sickle claw might not be obvious until the foot lifted or the animal changed posture. Then, in one moment, the outline might flare. A rival appears near a food source. The raptor raises its body, opens its arms enough for the forelimb feathers to show, angles its head, and shifts weight from foot to foot. No contact yet. The display is a negotiation. If the rival retreats, both animals avoid injury. If it does not, the scene can become physical quickly. Display behavior is rarely preserved, but it is common in living animals, especially those with visual structures. Feathers are ideal for it. They can be colored, lifted, spread, shaken, or held still. Even muted plumage can create contrast through posture. Velociraptor's quill knobs do not prove a specific display, but they make it reasonable to imagine feathered arms as part of communication. Such communication would matter during breeding as well. Courtship in feathered dinosaurs is mostly inferred from birds and from display structures in extinct species, but it would be surprising if Velociraptor lacked any social signals. A mate must be approached. A rival must be assessed. A nest site must be chosen or defended. These behaviors leave faint traces, if any, but they are part of the life behind the bones. The eggs of Velociraptor itself are not definitively known in the same iconic way as some other Mongolian dinosaur eggs, but as a theropod dinosaur, it reproduced by laying eggs. The broader record of theropod nesting shows that many bird-like reproductive traits evolved before modern birds. Eggs were arranged in nests. Adults in some lineages brooded. Embryos developed inside hard-shelled eggs. The dinosaur age was full of nests, not just skeletons. A Velociraptor hatchling would have entered a world filled with danger. Its small body would be vulnerable to larger predators, other raptors, lizards, mammals, oviraptorosaurs, and environmental hazards. It would have needed warmth, food, and shelter. Whether adults cared for young after hatching is unknown. Some theropods may have had more parental care than once thought, but the evidence varies by group. If adults did guard nests, feathers could help cover eggs or shade them from sun. If they did not, feathers still helped the adults themselves survive and reproduce. The behavior is uncertain, but the biological problem is clear. Eggs in a dry, open environment need protection from temperature extremes, burial, predators, and drying. Every nesting dinosaur in the Geodocta had to solve that problem in some way. It is important not to make Velociraptor too mammalian in these reconstructions. Pair bonding, family groups, teaching young, and coordinated hunting are all possible in broad evolutionary terms, but not equally supported. Birds show many complex behaviors, and crocodilians show parental care, so some dinosaur complexity is reasonable. The exact form in Velociraptor remains unknown. The safest language is suggestive, not declarative. Still, even simple parental behavior would change how we see the animal. A predator can guard eggs, a hunter can shelter young, a feathered dinosaur can be dangerous and attentive in different moments. Living animals hold these roles without contradiction. The fossil record has already shown enough brooding theropods to make the old view of dinosaurs as indifferent egg layers feel too narrow. The Geodocta nesting record turns the landscape into a place of vulnerability. Eggs buried in sand, adults positioned above or near clutches, young animals leaving small bones, predators investigating, storms threatening to cover everything. A nest is a promise made under unstable conditions. Many promises failed. A few failures became fossils. The same sand that protected eggs could bury them too deeply. The same dry air that limited decay could desiccate exposed embryos. The same storm that brought water could collapse a dune onto a nest. Life in the Geodocta was balanced between scarcity and sudden excess. Too little water and animals weaken. Too much at once and the ground moves. This balance may explain why the formation preserves such arresting scenes. Dry environments can leave carcasses exposed, but dune collapses can entomb them abruptly. The ecosystem's danger becomes the fossil record's gift. Velociraptor is known not because its world was gentle, but because its world sometimes buried disaster before it could be erased. When the animal died under ordinary conditions, its body probably did not fossilize. It may have been scavenged by other theropods, mammals, insects, and microbes. Bones could be scattered by wind and animals. Sun could crack them. Sand could abrade them. Only special circumstances carried a body into stone. Every specimen is therefore both evidence of life and evidence of an unusual death. This is true of the original Velociraptor material as well as the famous specimens. Each fossil represents one animal or part of one animal, not the species in total. Paleontologists compare individuals to understand variation. Some differences come from growth. Some from sex, perhaps, though sex is difficult to determine in most dinosaur fossils. Some from injury or distortion. Some from species-level differences. The more specimens available, the clearer the animal becomes. Variation matters because a single perfect reconstruction can imply a false uniformity. Real animals differ. One Velociraptor may have been larger, another smaller. One may have carried injuries. One may have had slightly different proportions. Feathers may have varied with age, season, or sex, as they do in many living birds. The species was a population, not a model. The fossil record rarely gives enough soft tissue to show these variations directly. Still, thinking in populations prevents the animal from becoming too clean. There were young adults and old adults, strong animals and weak ones, successful breeders and individuals that died before reproducing. Evolution happens in populations, but fossils often give us individuals. One individual stepped into history with its claw against a Protoceratops. Another left a forearm that would one day show quill knobs. Another gave the genus its name. Others remain in collections, papers, casts, or fragments. Together, they make Velociraptor more than one famous scene. They make it a species reconstructed from many partial returns. Those returns also remind us that science is cumulative. A name from 1924 becomes clearer through later fieldwork. A specimen found in 1971 reshapes behavior. A paper in 2007 reshapes the skin and feathers. New relatives from China reshape expectations about plumage. Each discovery does not erase the previous one. It adds pressure, detail, and correction. There may be more waiting. A better preserved Velociraptor with feather impressions could change the reconstruction again. A nest associated with adult remains could alter ideas about reproduction. A trackway confidently assigned to a close relative could refine movement. A new specimen from a precise locality could clarify age or variation. The animal is extinct, but the evidence is not finished speaking. That is part of the fascination of the Gobi. The desert looks open, but it holds sealed rooms of time beneath its surfaces. A ravine can expose a skull that has not seen daylight since the Cretaceous. A slope can release an eggshell fragment older than grasslands. A cliff can hold the intertwined bodies of animals that died before any primate existed. The land is modern, but the stone beneath it is crowded. A paleontologist bending over a small bone in that landscape is not stepping into a fantasy. They are reading a physical object. The bone has weight. It has mineral texture. It can break. It can be measured. It can be compared. Deep time becomes understandable through touch, not only imagination. For a channel like Jurassical, this is where the dinosaur age feels closest. Not in the largest animal or the loudest battle, but in the point where evidence and scene meet. A claw in sandstone, a row of quill knobs, a beak closed around an arm, a desert cliff at sunset. These things do not need much decoration. They are already carrying millions of years. The real Velociraptor is a correction, but it is also an invitation. It asks us to look again at a familiar name until the familiar image falls away. Under it is a smaller animal, a feathered animal, a Mongolian animal, a predator of dry Cretaceous basins. It has no need to be made larger. It becomes more interesting when allowed to be itself. Its world was not empty. Protoceratops moved through it in groups and as individuals. Oviraptorosaurs nested in it. Lizards and mammals crossed the ground beneath larger feet. Insects worked through plants and carcasses. Storms came. Dunes shifted. Eggs hatched or failed. Feathers caught dust. Claws pressed into prey or ground. The Cretaceous passed one day at a time. When we say Velociraptor lived 75 million years ago, the number is almost too large to hold. It can become abstract, like distance without direction. A fossil reduces that distance. The toe bone, the skull, the forearm, the broken arm in the fighting dinosaurs specimen, each one gives deep time an edge. Something specific happened. Something specific survived. The animal's scientific importance rests on that specificity. It is not just a representative of raptors, it is the type of a famous genus, a Geodocta predator, a feathered dromaeosaur with direct forearm evidence, and one half of an extraordinary predator-prey fossil. Its story belongs to anatomy, behavior, sedimentology, history of discovery, and the changing relationship between dinosaurs and birds. Few small theropods carry so many public and scientific meanings at once. Yet the animal itself did not carry meanings. It carried muscle, feathers, hunger, injury, and instinct. It lived without knowing the future importance of its bones. It did not know Mongolia as a country, the Cretaceous as a period, or itself as a dinosaur. Those are human frames. The animal knew heat, prey, rivals, shelter, water, and the ground under its feet. This distinction helps keep the narration honest. We can use human words to explain the fossil, but we should not let those words replace the animal. Velociraptor was not a villain, an icon, a brand, or a mistake in a movie. It was a living theropod. Everything else came later. Later came the burial. Later came stone. Later came erosion. Later came expeditions, names, papers, museums, debates, documentaries, and arguments about feathers. Later came the public image, and then the correction of that image. The animal was long gone before any of this began. Its bones waited through all of it. The waiting is difficult to imagine because it is not active. For tens of millions of years, the fossil did nothing. Continents shifted. Mammals diversified. Grasslands spread. Humans evolved, spoke, traveled, made tools, crossed deserts, built museums, and finally looked down at a piece of bone in red rock. The distance between the animal and the observer is almost everything, and yet the fossil connects them. A claw does not tell the whole story. It cannot tell us the color of the feathers or the sound of the call. It cannot say whether the animal saw the sand collapse or whether death came instantly. But it tells us enough to begin. It tells us there was a foot, a lifted toe, a predator's body balanced over the ground. It tells us that the animal was not imaginary. The feathered arms tell another part. They tell us that the raptor was closer to birds than the old image allowed. They tell us feathers had already spread beyond flight. They tell us the Cretaceous ground was crossed by animals that would have looked, in some lights, like strange birds with teeth and long tails. The distance between a dinosaur and a bird becomes smaller when a velociraptor forearm is held under light. The fighting dinosaurs tell a third part. They show contact, risk, and resistance. A predator attacking or grappling with prey. A herbivore fighting back. A sudden burial that turned motion into evidence. The fossil does not need a winner. Its value is that both animals are still there, locked in the same sediment, refusing to let the encounter become abstract. The Jadakta tells the widest part. It tells us that place matters. Velociraptor was not simply a raptor anywhere. It was shaped by dunes, storms, intermittent water, low vegetation, and a community of animals suited to dry, late Cretaceous Mongolia. Remove the place, and the animal becomes generic. Put the place back, and it becomes real. So the real Velociraptor is not the largest raptor, not the most powerful predator, and not the monster most people first imagined. It is a small feathered hunter from a hard desert world. It could be dangerous without being huge. It could be bird-like without being harmless. It could be famous and still misunderstood. Its bones ask for a quieter kind of attention. That attention changes the way the entire dinosaur age appears. The Mesozoic was not only giants, it was also small predators moving through scrub, eggs under sand, mammals underfoot, lizards in burrows, feathers on arms, and sudden storms burying lives before they could decay. The age of dinosaurs was built from details as much as from scale. A giant sauropod can make deep time feel immense. A velociraptor claw can make it feel close. Both are necessary. One shows the outer limits of dinosaur bodies. The other brings us down to the ground, where a single footstep, a single feather attachment, or a single broken arm can change what we think we know. There is one more way to understand Velociraptor, and it begins with absence. For all its fame, the animal is known through a limited number of specimens compared with many common dinosaurs. Paleontologists must be careful because a few bones can carry a heavy public image. A single famous fossil can dominate the imagination. A single paper can change reconstructions. That does not make the science weak. It makes the evidence precious, and it makes caution part of the animal's story. A fossil species is not a character with a finished biography. It is a hypothesis built from specimens that share diagnostic traits. Velociraptor mongoliensis is recognized through skull shape, jaw details, proportions, claws, and other anatomical features. Some material is more complete. Some is fragmentary. Some specimens may be distorted by burial. Every diagnosis has to separate true anatomy from crushing, breakage, and individual variation. This is slow work, and it is the opposite of the instant certainty that popular dinosaur images often suggest. The skull material from Mongolia is especially valuable because the face of a predator tells many stories at once. Openings in the skull reduce weight. The long snout places teeth forward. The eye socket suggests an alert animal with a strong visual world. The jaw joint, tooth row, and muscle attachments frame the way the mouth closed on prey. A skull is not only a head, it is a map of feeding, breathing, seeing, smelling, and moving through space. The body plan also places Velociraptor within Maniraptora, the group of theropods that includes birds and their closest non-avian relatives. Maniraptorans often had long arms, semilunate wrist bones, three-fingered hands, feathers, and other traits that make them look increasingly bird-like as the fossil record improves. Velociraptor sits inside this transformation, but remains firmly non-avian. It shows how far bird-like anatomy had spread before the line that led to modern birds became the only surviving dinosaur branch. That can be difficult to picture because the word bird carries the modern world with it. Sparrows at gutters, pigeons in train stations, eagles above cliffs, penguins at the edge of ice. Velociraptor was none of these, but it shared older structures with the lineage that produced them. Its feathers did not make it gentle. Its claws did not make it primitive. It was both bird-like and predatory because the two ideas were never opposites in evolution. Feathers on a predator also change the way danger appears. A feathered animal can look light and still strike hard. It can look familiar and still be foreign. The old monster image used naked skin to make Velociraptor seem reptilian and alien. The fossil evidence makes it more connected to the living world. That connection does not tame it. It makes it sharper, because now the animal belongs to biology rather than fantasy. The Jadakta Formation's preservation style also affects what we know about soft tissues. Fine lake deposits can capture feather impressions as dark films, but wind-blown sandstones usually preserve bone more readily than delicate integument. This means Velociraptor's feathers had to be inferred for years from relatives before direct forearm evidence strengthened the case. The absence of visible feathers in most Mongolian specimens was a limitation of preservation, not a strong argument for bare skin. A similar caution applies to behavior. The fighting dinosaur's fossil is direct evidence of physical interaction, but it is not a complete ethogram of Velociraptor life. It does not tell us how often attacks happened, whether they were usually successful, or whether the animal preferred certain prey. It does, however, prove that Velociraptor and Protoceratops could meet in violent contact. That single fact is powerful enough without turning it into a universal rule. The specimen also compresses two evolutionary strategies into one image. Protoceratops represents defense through beak, body strength, group life perhaps, and the ability to resist. Velociraptor represents speed, claws, teeth, and grasping. Both strategies were successful until they met conditions neither could control. In the end, the decisive force may not have been claw or beak, but sand. The environment became the final actor. This is often how the fossil record works. The animal's adaptations matter until the world changes too quickly around them. A dune collapses. A river shifts. Ash falls. Mud dries. A drought lengthens. A storm arrives. Bodies evolved for one set of risks are caught by another. The past is full of animals that were well suited to life, and still died suddenly. For Velociraptor, the larger environmental story includes the position of Asia during the late Cretaceous. Continental interiors could support dry basins far from stable marine influence. Regional climates shifted with geography, topography, and season. The Jadocta was not isolated from global Cretaceous conditions, but its local ecology mattered most to the animals living there. A global age of warmth can still contain harsh, dry habitats. The plants in those habitats are harder to know than the animals, because plant fossils from the Jadocta are less famous than dinosaur skeletons. Still, root traces, sedimentology, and comparisons suggest vegetation existed in patches, enough to support herbivores like Protoceratops and other plant eaters. Low shrubs, tough ground cover, and conifer-related plants may have formed scattered resources rather than continuous forest. This gave the landscape texture: open sand, rooted patches, dry channels, and sheltered spots where small animals could hide. A predator moving through patchy vegetation behaves differently from one moving through dense forest. It uses distance, low ridges, broken sightlines, and timing. Cover is limited, so posture becomes important. Wind direction matters because scent travels in open air. The body has to stay low and controlled. Velociraptor's size fits such a world. It was not made to crash through trees. It was made to move through openings. Open ground also exposes mistakes. A failed attack may leave the predator visible. A larger animal can notice. A rival can approach. Heat can punish unnecessary movement. In such a place, survival favors animals that read the terrain and use short chances well. The real raptor's drama is not constant violence. It is the pressure of choosing correctly. Museum reconstructions have changed as this evidence has accumulated. Older mounts and illustrations often showed thin, naked raptors with pronated hands and exposed teeth. Newer reconstructions tend to fold the wrists correctly, lift the tail, add feathers, reduce the size, and place the animal in dry Cretaceous Mongolia rather than a generic jungle. These changes can seem small individually. Together, they produce a different creature. The change is not finished. Future discoveries may alter the amount of feathering, details of the face, estimates of body mass, or interpretations of behavior. Science is not embarrassed by revision. Revision is the method. The point is not to defend one image forever, but to keep the image accountable to evidence. Velociraptor has already taught that lesson unusually well. So when the name is spoken, it should call up more than a claw. It should call up the red cliffs of Mongolia, the sand that buried bodies, the forearm bumps that revealed feathers, the small skull with cutting teeth, the long balancing tail, and the Protoceratops that fought back. It should call up an animal restored from evidence, not inflated by memory. This is the strange generosity of fossils. They do not give everything, but they give enough to overturn what seemed obvious. A small mark on bone can redraw the skin. A skeleton pair can reveal behavior. A sandstone layer can rebuild a climate. A claw can bring a predator back into focus after 75 million years. The past remains incomplete, but it is not silent. Even the word real should be treated with care. A real reconstruction is not the same as a final reconstruction. It is the best fit between present evidence and honest inference. For Velociraptor, that fit includes feathers, small size, a raised sickle claw, a stiff tail, a dry Mongolian setting, and a cautious view of behavior. It also includes uncertainty about color, exact social life, vocalization, and many details of reproduction. The real animal is not the one with every blank filled. It is the one whose blanks are left visible. A fossil can make the past feel certain because bone is solid. But certainty in paleontology comes in different strengths. We can be very confident that Velociraptor had an enlarged second toe claw. We can be very confident that it was a dromaeosaurid theropod. We can be strongly confident that it had feathers. Because of the quill knobs and its relatives, we can be less certain about whether it hunted alone or in groups, what its feathers looked like in color, and what sounds it made. Good storytelling should keep these levels separate. This separation does not weaken the atmosphere. It deepens it. A world where some things are known and others remain hidden feels more like the real past than a world explained too completely. The Jadakta Formation gives us sand, skeletons, eggs, and sudden death. It does not give us every sunrise. It does not give us every call. It leaves room for silence around the evidence, and that silence belongs there. The silence also reminds us how brief any living moment was. A velociraptor may have lived for years, but the fossil record might preserve only its death. A Protoceratops may have survived many seasons before the day it met a predator. A nest may have been tended for weeks before a storm erased it. Deep time is immense, but individual lives were still narrow and immediate. They were not aware of being ancient. To the raptor, the Cretaceous was not old. It was the present. The sand was not fossil sediment. It was ground. The Protoceratops was not a specimen. It was danger or food. The feathers were not evidence. They were warmth, signal, surface, and body. This is the simplest way to bring the animal back without exaggeration. Let its world be ordinary to itself. That ordinary world included discomfort, grit in the eyes, parasites in feathers, hunger after a failed hunt, heat radiating from sand, a sudden need to retreat from a larger animal, a damaged claw, a dry pool. These details do not make the animal less cinematic. They make it less artificial. The real velociraptor lived by solving small problems constantly. It also lived among generations, parents, hatchlings, young adults, old individuals, rivals, and potential mates existed across the landscape, even if fossils rarely connect them. The species persisted because enough individuals survived long enough to reproduce. That fact sits behind every skeleton. A predator is not only a single body. It is part of a chain of bodies extending backward and forward through time until the chain ends. Eventually, the chain did end. Whether through shifting environments, changing prey, competition, or the ordinary turnover of Cretaceous faunas, Velociraptor vanished from the record. Its relatives continued in other forms for a time. Birds carried the broader theropod inheritance through the extinction at the end of the Cretaceous, but Velociraptor itself became stone, then name, then icon, then correction. The animal disappeared. The evidence remained. That evidence is enough to change the animal without making it complete. A skull gives the face a limit. A claw gives the foot its danger. A forearm gives the feathers their anchor. A formation gives the air its dryness and the ground its color. Put together, they do not create a fantasy creature. They recover a small part of a living one, still incomplete, still partly hidden, but no longer lost in the old shape we gave it.
The rest remains beneath the sand, not as a secret waiting for one perfect answer, but as the natural limit of evidence. Paleontology does not remove that limit. It works carefully along its edge. At the end, return to the sandstone. The red surface is warm again. A small bone rests partly exposed, pale against the darker grains. Around it, the desert is moving in ways too slow to see. Wind touches the cliff. Sand gathers in a crack. Somewhere beneath the surface, more of the animal may still be hidden. It is not the movie creature waiting there. It is not a scaly giant in a jungle. It is the real animal, smaller, feathered, precise, and bound to Mongolia's Cretaceous dunes. The claw, the forearm, the skull, the fight, the sand. Piece by piece, they bring it back as far as stone can bring anything back. A feathered raptor crosses the damp edge of a dune after rain. The sickle claw stays lifted. The tail balances the body. The arms fold close, carrying feathers that will not preserve. For a moment, the footprints are clear. Then the wind begins to soften them, and the animal moves on into a world of red sand, low plants, and waiting stone.